All right, so are we ready, Kathleen? I don't know where Joe is. So he'll come in, but we'll get started.
Cool, let's check them out.
Okay. The chair is going to bring to order the Single Family Design Board for Monday, July 24th. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address any item not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, the chair will go to the approval minutes of the Single Family Design Board meeting for July 10th. You'll have that in front of you. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? Okay, let's go through each item for corrections, additions. Item 1, 1703 La Vista del Oceano. Item number 2, 1708 La Vista del Oceano Lane. Item number 3, 727 San Roque Road. There's just 3 items. Hearing no comments, the chair will call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. Katie, can we go to consent calendar for July 17th, please?
The minutes for the July 17th consent agenda are as follows. Item A, 209 East Islay Street, received approval of review after final is submitted. Item B, 825 Roble Lane was continued 1 week to consent at the applicant's request. Item C, 421 West Mountain Drive, received final approval as submitted. Item D, 3779 Lincolnwood Drive was continued indefinitely to consent due to the applicant's absence. Item E, 901 Alita Lane was continued 1 week to consent due to the applicant's absence.
Thank you. May I have a motion for approval, please?
I need to make a correction, or do we do that after the motion?
You can do the motion and we can make a correction, or either way.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, do we have corrections?
Yes. On the first item, 209 East Islay, the landscape architect was a different one.
Oh, yes.
It was
We'll fix that. It was Courtney Miller.
Courtney Miller, that's right.
All right, that's a correction. Any further comments? Additions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Let's go to consent calendar for this morning, July 24th. Katie.
The minutes for the July 24th consent agenda are as follows. Item A, 727 San Roque Road, received final approval as submitted. Item B, 1686 Las Canoas Road was continued 1 week to consent. Item C, 825 Roble Lane was continued indefinitely to consent at the applicant's request. Item D, 33 Los Alturas Circle was continued 1 week to consent with the comment that the architecture is ready for final approval. Item E, 1540 Franceschi Road was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer to return to consent with positive comments, that the proposed modification request is aesthetically appropriate and compatible with the rest of the proposed project. The proposed modification does not pose consistency issues with SFDB guidelines or city ordinances. The proposed colors are acceptable and appropriate, and the scope of the proposed project is not visible from the street. Item F, 10 Rincon Vista Road, received project design approval and final approval with the NPO findings. Item G, 1585 Overlook Lane was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer to return to consent with the following comments. The proposed modification request is aesthetically appropriate, and the proposed modification request does not pose consistency issues with SFDB guidelines or city ordinances. Item H, 901 Alita Lane, received project design approval and was continued 1 week to consent with the finding that the NPO findings have been met. And item I, 124 Palisades Drive was continued 1 week to consent with the comments to restudy the deck size and configuration and to share the proposed plans with the neighbors and work together to achieve neighborhood compatibility.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments? Do I have a motion for approval?
Make the motion.
Do I have a second? Okay, any further comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Okay, here we go. Chair Sweeney,
Here.
Vice Chair Miller,
Here.
Lisa James, Joseph Matisha,
Here.
Robert Richards.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Announcements. Katie?
Renee has an announcement that she's going to make real quick.
Yes. Renee Brooke, welcome.
Hello, board members. I'm Renee Brooke, city planner. I'm not sure I've met newer board members. I just want to make a quick announcement. As I'm sure you're aware, I hope you are aware that Jaime Limon is retiring from the city. This is his last week. As we all adjust to that change, we also have been looking to identify his successor, and so I have promoted Irma Unsueta to the Design Review and Historic Preservation Supervisor. She's been with the city for over 20 years. Her most recent role is acting zoning and enforcement supervisor. Prior to that, she's worked in every section of the division, long-range design review. So just wanted to let you know, I'm sure she'll be making the rounds soon to the boards and commissions, and just wanted you to be aware of that.
Okay, excellent. Just for our edification and the public's, she oversees not only our board, but what other review boards?
Correct. So she will oversee your board, the Historic Landmarks Commission, Architectural Board of Review, and Sign Committee,
Okay,
as well as our whole historic preservation effort, too.
great. Thank you. We look forward to that. Okay. Other announcements? The only other announcement I have is at noon today, I attended a meeting with city staff regarding the accessory dwelling unit issue that staff is trying to corral at this moment. And so in a few minutes, we're going to have a report reflecting that. So I'm going to withhold my comments until staff has a chance to bring you up to date. Are there any other announcements? Hearing none, well, then let's go to item number 1, accessory dwelling units. And we have Rosie here to tell us the latest. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, board members. I'm Rosie Feisty. I'm with City of Santa Barbara in Long Range Planning. And I'm here today to talk to you about a project we just launched and are starting to work on. It's an ordinance for accessory dwelling units. So today I'm going to give you just a brief background and a little bit of history on what's been going on. I'm going to summarize what we understand about the state requirements for these units. I'm going to review what we think or what's allowed for local standards and some proposed ordinance provisions we're considering at this time. And in particular, what we really want from you is input on the project-specific administrative staff review standards in your single-family design board guidelines. And you should have got a copy of that. It's mostly on pages 7 and 8 is what we're looking at for that. Let's see. Oh, how do I go to the next slide? Do I just down arrow? Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'll start with a little background, and I want to leave plenty of time for your comments and stuff, so I'll go through this pretty quick. But the state has encouraged local governments to allow accessory dwelling units for a long time to meet local housing needs. In 2016, housing became sort of an issue in the state legislature, and they did some amendments to the laws and passed amendments to their own second unit law and passed an ordinance that basically was effective January 1st, 2017. And the standards stipulate that local ordinances that do not align with state law are null and void, which is the case for our own local ordinance. And that's until we either adopt our own ordinance or just use the state's provisions. So as a result, until such time that we have our own ordinance, the state's standards apply. And it's worth mentioning that if you're looking at a project and there's some aspects of it that are not part of the ADU, but it's proposed in conjunction with the building permit, then there's still full design review and approval. However, there's nuances to that we're still, what's ADU versus non-ADU that we're still researching. So our housing element has had a policy or has a policy that supports development of these units to provide for more, but there's ordinance provisions to amend what we already had on the books to provide for more site planning flexibility and affordable design concepts. So under the former secondary dwelling unit provisions, the city had permitted about 16 secondary dwelling units. But since the state legislation applied, we've had, about 8 building permits issued and over, say, 130 or so applications. So there's been a strong interest in the community for permitting ADUs. So I'll just summarize sort of what's part of the state ADU requirements. The application needs to be processed within 120 days of submission with no discretionary review or hearing. The lot needs to be zoned for residential use and contain an existing single-family dwelling. The city is, however, allowed to designate areas where ADUs will be permitted, as long as it's not applied in such a manner that it would burden the development of second units or accessory dwelling units. The legislature limited the maximum increased floor area of a unit to not exceed 50% of the existing dwelling's floor area, and then put a cap on the absolute maximum as 1,200 square feet. And then no passageway or an exterior walkway can be required for the accessory dwelling unit. A few more things. So the legislature determined that no setback was required if an existing garage or similar structure is converted to an ADU. There's 5 different situations where parking is not required. I won't go through those in details, but if you want to know, I can go over that. An ADU can't be sold separately, but the city can require the ADU to be the owner occupant, with the owner residing in the primary or accessory unit, and it can also require that they not be used for short-term rentals. And then the definition of an ADU can include what's called an efficiency unit that's as small as 150 square feet or a manufactured home. So notwithstanding what the state requires in their legislation, there's some things that the city is allowed to regulate in our own local ordinance. So we can determine where ADUs would be permitted, and we can also prohibit them in areas where there's health and safety risks. An example of that would be a high fire hazard area, and our existing housing element policy has language supporting that we continue a prohibition of these in high fire hazard areas. We can determine a minimum lot size or a maximum unit size up to that state limit of 1,200 square feet. There's some regulation or some provisions that we can determine the location and setbacks for accessory dwelling units with a couple of exceptions. We can set a maximum height limit. Where parking is required, we can determine the appropriate location for that parking, and we can add some provisions for protecting historic resources. So the table 2 in your memo, we listed some of the provisions that we're considering at this time for the draft ordinance. Like I said, it's still draft. There's things we're considering as staff and that we're getting some public input on, and eventually we'll come up with a recommendation for the Planning Commission. As I mentioned earlier, the high fire hazard area prohibition is supported by housing element policy, so that's one of the things we're considering. And also, we're looking at maybe a prohibition on building sites that are sloped 30% or greater, although most of those are already in the high fire hazard area. We're proposing a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet and a maximum unit size of 600 square feet. Like I said, we're taking input on that and are open to other sizes. And we're also recommending that accessory dwelling units count towards the maximum FAR on a lot. As far as location goes, we're considering prohibiting detached ADUs in the front yard, except when it's a conversion of, let's say, an existing legally permitted garage. And setbacks of the unit would comply with existing setback standards. And then for parking, we're considering prohibiting uncovered parking in the front setback and in the front yard unless it's adequately screened. And for protection of historic resources, we're researching what types of resources can be considered for this protection, whether it's designated landmarks or potential or something on the potential resources list or a historic or landmark district. We still need to get some input on that from legal staff, but that's one of the things that we're looking into. And then, like I said, specifically, we'd love your input on these. And these are some project-specific design standards we're considering. And it was in your packet, it was in red, underlined ink, if you got it in a copy in that manner. So we'd like your input on that. And some of the draft revisions we're considering are, just turn to that part. So standards that would require non-reflective materials, roofing and sidings that match the existing buildings. We'd like to see the entry for the unit not on the same elevation as the primary dwelling unless it's a shared entry. If there's a garage conversion, we'd like the siding, windows, and doors that match the existing building. We're also looking at some methods to ensure the unit is subordinate to the primary dwelling in size, location, and appearance. So that's where we're looking into some height limits, screening, and other methods. We're looking at some limitations that would protect the natural topography of the site. And then finally, some consideration for where windows, decks, and would be placed to address privacy concerns of neighbors. So where we're at on this process is we kicked this project off in June with the selection of a consultant from Rincon Consultants, and they're assisting with drafting the ordinance and ensuring it all complies with the state law. Right now we're in a process of seeking public input, so we're coming to you today. We're going to Historic Landmarks Commission on Wednesday. We've met with Allied Neighborhood, a subset of the Allied Neighborhood organizations and the American Institute of Architects. We're taking public input we have a website where people can sign up for notifications or email me. I'm sorry I didn't put the email address on the slide, but it's adu@santabarbaraca.gov, and anyone can come talk to me afterwards if they want me to repeat that. After all these meetings and public input, we're working to get a draft ordinance ready for Planning Commission hearing, and that's scheduled, well, we haven't scheduled it yet, but we're thinking of late August or early September. Then we'll go to Ordinance Committee and City Council hearings, and then implementation, looking at sort of late fall for that. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll open it up for discussion and questions. We'll try to answer any questions you have, but I will be writing them down. We know there's a lot more to research and look into.
I have a question. You brought up the issue about screening. Now, would we have purview over the screening if that's going to be required, or?
That's a good question. That's one of those issues where there's a little line between what's part of the ADU and what's considered non-ADU component.
No.
So I'll need to look into that to determine
Okay.
that.
Rosie, just to be clear, some of these things that you're proposing, even the items in red, would be guidelines that staff would use to give an administrative review of an ADU rather than this board. Is that correct?
Correct. I should have been more clear about that. Yes.
So there will be limitations on what this board can review versus what staff can review. That's kind of how it's going to work?
Correct. And then the staff review is really anything to do with the unit itself. What this board can review would be a project that proposes other things on the lot,
Right.
but not the unit itself.
Okay.
But like you said, you mentioned earlier today, there's a few items there, it's a little gray.
Right. And I was going to let other people chime in, but I'll share with you what I shared with the committee at noon today. But go ahead. Any other questions?
What you're stating is you'd like our input, but we don't get to review it later, and we better be more specific right now to give you some good guidelines
Correct. The more specific these are now, then, and this is what staff will use, and it'll be almost like a checklist, the better.
Will the city ever, but you can't determine that, will the city ever let the design boards be?
You're not on. No, here, I'll get it. There, now you should be on.
Will the city potentially ever allow us, I can hear myself, be advisory to these units that are being one per lot all over the city? It seems like a lot of things that are going up that we're not going to have any.
Yeah, I mean, per the state law, it has to be ministerial, so we can't have that discretionary review process. So I don't think that's a part that we can't change.
Other questions? Lisa?
Yes, the ADU would be added to the existing FAR of the footprint of the current structure? Is that how that works?
That's a proposal right now that we're thinking of.
Will we be changing FAR guidelines overall as a result of that? Or?
Maybe
Yeah.
Renee can, this is one of the questions that came up earlier today.
So to answer your question, Lisa, so right now, since we're operating under the state law, we have to abide by the limits and controls of what they let us regulate. And right now it says that it can't, the square footage of the ADU does not count towards the FAR. It's exempt or accepted from the total FAR calculation. But what we propose, again, and it's supported by the housing element policy, would be that it would count towards the FAR. So that would be something we would write into the ordinance explicitly. So no new calculations, it's just that that is the part of what is defined as net floor area.
One of the biggest things that comes up among us is if the FARs are anywhere near what they're supposed to be. All of a sudden now they've thrown FARs in the middle of, yeah, without giving us.
It's called, to some people, gaming the system. So this is an issue that I communicated to Renee earlier. In fact, I think on Friday I sent her a memo that we have had a project come to us. We've given final approval. It's actually getting appealed to the city council, where the applicant is trying to do the same thing, take out that 1,200 or 800, whatever it is, out of the calculation of FER. So hopefully staff will be able to make some recommendations in that. The other thing that I shared with them is we did have a project come to us that was on a large acre site with a proposal for a major renovation and an addition of a second floor to the main house, some landscaping, driveways, and so forth. But they also had an accessory structure, not a dwelling unit, but a structure on the site several feet away from the main house. And as you may recall, that particular applicant, we weren't allowed to look at that unit because it was being converted to an ADU. But we had a lot of questions about what the limitation was of where we could review it. Can we review the landscape up to the wall? Do we have to keep 5 feet out, 10 feet out? Can we review the deck that's attached to it? Can we review the screening or the paving of the required parking space?
And I do
under the
remember
ADU?
that.
Remember you call that?
Yep.
So those are questions that I shared with staff, and hopefully they'll be able to get back to us. One of my observations is as this law moves through, and even irregardless of the ordinance that ultimately is adopted by the city, as we've experienced, this board is going to become the public head of those discussions. Because as you know, many of the projects we see don't have to go to the Planning Commission. The only public hearing a project receives is at this board. And so we're going to need to be prepared to deal with addressing public's concerns or support for these ADUs that may appear in front of our board as a part of another project. And our hands are going to be tied to some degree. So I would urge all of us to think about how we're going to be able to conduct ourselves in a way that's going to be fairly explicit, because appeals will be enacted, I assume, by neighborhoods that are not happy about the introduction of an ADU in their particular street or so forth and so on. So it's going to add to the burden of our ability to interface with the public. Because for, as I say, many projects, they don't have to go to the Planning Commission. And even at HLC, I've had a couple of conversations with my colleagues at HLC, and they don't see a lot of residential stuff because their areas are fairly limited. So we're going to be, this board is going to be the public face of that discussion. So anyway, with that note, any other questions, comments?
Well, what comes up for me for this, plus the high-density unit in the ordinance, is it's an argument of the right to own housing as opposed to quality of life issues. And that's what we're butting up against, is the quality of life of this town as opposed to having everyone housed in it. And what does that mean, and what are the implications? I mean, already what I see happening is that there's no study or serious conversation regarding the traffic impacts that this is all bringing into the city. Already it's over impacted. I personally live in Lompoc, and I'm one of those that can't afford to live here. But I'm perfectly happy where I live, what I do, and this quality of my life is, I'm perfectly happy with it. But there are no conversations as to public transportation, because I think over 20,000 people commute into this town every day. I don't think we can house 20,000 people, no matter what they do. And I think this is going down a very slippery slope in terms of trying to resolve an issue that I think they're not really seeing what the true issue is, but that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Before I let you go, we do have one person in the audience who wishes to address this item. If you'd come forward, Nancy Mulholland, please. Yes, and you use any one of these, and you have a couple of minutes to address the board. Sure. Turn that one off. Yeah, that one's off. Use this one. There you go. Otherwise, they back each other.
As I said, my name is Nancy Mulholland. I'm actually a resident and a homeowner here in the city, and I'm taking this opportunity to share my views and concerns about the proposed ordinance on accessory dwelling units. I have a slightly different, I think, approach or belief than what I'm hearing here, but I think it's quite evident by the report and the notable number of applications for ADUs that have come in since January that there is a need for an easier, less expensive, less cumbersome and permitting and building process to create affordable housing stock in residential areas. My two concerns that I just want to get on the record about the proposed ordinance are actually focused on two elements. One is lot zoning, and the other is lot size. The state law clearly permits ADUs on single and multifamily zoned properties that have an existing single residential unit on that property. The proposed standards would prohibit constructions of an ADU on any lot that is currently zoned as R3 or R4, and on lots that are smaller than 5,000 square feet. This would be prohibited even when there is an existing single-family residence on that site, and perhaps nothing other than a single-family residence. Both of these proposed restrictions appear to be discriminatory towards owners of such lots and would actually, in my opinion, be in violation of the state requirement that local standards should not, quote, unduly burden the development of ADUs that are permitted under the state law. I would encourage the board to work with planning staff to make sure that these obstructions, which I believe are unacceptable and possibly in violation of state law, and request that they be eliminated. I think this can be done and be done well without ruining our quality of life here, but by permitting us to have additional family housing on our lots, family, friends, caregivers, and long-term rentals that are needed here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I can share with you and with my colleagues, that was a large discussion today with the architects, because we all recognize if the goal is to try to provide more housing in all kinds of areas, if we discriminate to some degree, as you outline, that might encourage a lot of stuff continuing to go underground, and or developers coming in and tearing down a whole bunch of small stuff to convert the big stuff. So the architects recognize that that's actually a challenge.
I figured. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Can I just add
Yes,
one more
Rosie?
thing? So if you still have a few more minutes, if you want to comment on these administrative standards, we'd love to hear it now. If you need more time, this might be pretty new to you, and I've just given you the whole background and what we're looking for. I can give you my email address. There's, like I mentioned, the ADU at santabarbaraca.gov. Send your comments to me. I'd really like to hear them, and sooner but rather than later would be great.
Rosie, just because I've been watching this maybe more than my colleagues have had a chance to even look at the red sheet yet. Two things. One is a little further clarification, not right now, but as you go through this process, about the issue of materials and aesthetics of the ADU versus what it's next to or whatever, and how does that work with an administrative review? And then secondly, as I think I mentioned to you earlier today, the 25 feet thing, in terms of height, because I can imagine we could see some ADUs that want to get put on top of a 800 square foot garage that then gets an 800 square foot deck on top of that.
Right.
Okay, and so again, is there some way to find a fair approach to those kind of requests? So
Okay.
anyway, those are two things that came to mind after the meeting.
Okay.
I don't see Brian, I'll reiterate what you've commented. I don't see a big growth in the population of Santa Barbara. I would say the majority of these ADUs are going to be ones that are already in place, that are illegal, that are being used. I think the majority of them are. Because it is a lot less expensive to produce or have an ADU if it's already existing. And I have one of those. Shh, don't tell anybody.
You've got to make it legal.
Make it legal. It would be nice to make it legal, and that's what I'm going to do. And it doesn't raise the population of Santa Barbara or the traffic congestion.
Right now, you're right. For now,
But it's still
gates
expensive.
are open.
It's expensive to build one now because there are going to be so many regulations put in place by the city that they have to do this, this, and there are all these mitigation things of traffic mitigation. Each person that does this is going to pay for all these little things that go along. There's thousands of dollars worth of fees that are come before you even get a permit to allow this to happen, this ADUs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, other comments?
Just one more question that you don't need to answer. I just was a little, I had questions about what you meant by site plan flexibility and, open yard and all, what that really means, site plan flexibility. So.
Yeah, I know that language was in the housing element policy, and then it actually listed, I don't have it with me, but maybe 5 or 6 things for us to consider when we're amending it. So those are, the policy number is H15 in our housing element, and it kind of lists the different pieces of the ordinance that they wanted at the time to be amended. That was before the state law, so we have to look at those and see if they're still allowed or not, but that would be our guidance would start with that policy.
Any other comments? One last thing that I did share with the group at noon today was, part of our challenge as a board is we're given the task to look at projects for neighborhood compatibility, and yet neighborhood compatibility, as we've all experienced, isn't as well defined as perhaps we'd like it to be, at least on this board. So that's a challenge, because what you're really talking about in any of this, whether it's existing and illegal and now making it legal, or it's new or whatever, is if it's compatible to the neighborhood, then it shouldn't be an issue for anybody. So neighborhood compatibility, and then the other issue is the definition of neighborhood, as we've all experienced, because each of us on this board have an idea of what neighborhood is. We have applicants that think they know what the neighborhood is, and we have the public and the neighborhood that comes out, and they have their own idea what the neighborhood is. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge, and the ADU component is going to make that even more of a challenge. So with that, unless there's other comments, Rosie and Renee, thank you for coming today and sharing with us. We look forward to continuing the dialogue, and we hope to see what comes out of this.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lamone is here. He walked in. So, are you going to come up and give us some last words?
Yes. I wanted to say something positive about this board because sometimes you get critiqued about the way you exert or influence designs and sometimes asking for reductions. And it was primarily based on the fact that when we went out to do some post-construction evaluations, there were some really nice homes that we saw that you could see the effort that you had and the consideration that you made in order to make homes fit into a neighborhood. And, there were some reservations back in 2007 when this board was created about whether FARs would work. And you can't decide just by numbers. That I think it also created a level playing field when people knew that if they had a range of home, that they had a good chance of getting it approved without having a big debate about whether you were tripling or doubling the size of homes. And so I just wanted to thank you for your service. And that's really what I'm reflecting on my career about what did we get done, and do we have a system in place that really works. And the ultimate compliment, I think, was last week, the city council, an appeal, one of the appellants or the neighbor of an applicant requested that this board be the board to review the project rather than the Historic Landmarks Commission when it comes to NPO. And I think it's just a reflection that they look at this board and they try to see that you do work with applicants and to consider the impacts to neighbors and that there is a fair process. So just wanted to say that. So I'll miss working with all of you. I've enjoyed helping guide you in your weekly work, and thank you for letting me serve.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome, and I'm glad you're sitting here, because now we get to, I know there's a roast coming for you on Thursday.
That's correct.
But we'd like to, from our board, be able to express our appreciation and thoughts by giving you a little gift.
Wow. I recognize that
You recognize
watercolor.
that building, that's who you work for.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So that's on behalf of our board, Jaime. You have been a champion for us and really left us kind of go through there. The only request that we'd make is don't drive the van. But short of that, we'll do anything you'd ask us to do. But for all your years, and I've known you personally for the whole time you've been here, for 30 plus years, and I've worked with you on a lot of things. So I personally really appreciate your steadiness, your calm demeanor, and your ability to kind of keep us focused. So thank you.
Thank you, Viz. I'll treasure this. So it's going up on my wall.
Okay, good,
Appreciate it.
excellent. Thank you for coming down.
All right.
Okay. All right. Any other goodies for Jaime? We still got a Thursday party to do, so we'll deal with that when we get to Thursday. All right. Let's go to our first item, which is 418, or second item, 418 East Alomar Avenue. This is a review after final is requested for an as-built wall revision. Project was last reviewed on consent calendar. Staff is requesting the board take action on this revised request, and I'm assuming, Katie, you have something to share with us.
Oh my.
Is the applicant here? Come forward, please. Any other chairs? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I do have some staff comments when you're ready to listen to
Okay,
them.
maybe we should do the staff comments first so we kind of know where we're headed, and then you can share with us what you want to do. So yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, as the applicant will walk you through, is that we have a wall that was constructed along the front property line. And during construction, the inspector pointed out that there was a wing wall that protruded perpendicular at one end. And we, as staff, thought it was a minor change that we could place on the consent calendar. But during the consent review, there was concern about just the height of it and the way it extended, protruded out at the end. And so it wasn't found acceptable as designed. But we thought that the entire board should weigh in on this issue. And I think the property owner has some reasons and can explain to you how this evolved on the plans.
Okay, so that's why it's in front of us.
Yes.
So if you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Tina Takaya. Thank you very much for having me. Originally, my thought was it was on the plan, and when we built it, it got approved by the inspector. And the reason why we did this is because my neighbor's hedge is 4 feet taller and 2 feet wider out. And the Eugenia hedge, for all the years we've been living there, it's very difficult with all the leaves and the berries falling in. Not that I've complained at all. It's just that it's having the new planter. You can't really see it in this picture, but cutting it back a bit, it's really sinewy, and you can actually see into the neighbor's yard without that wall there. I understand what you're saying, and my thought process would be to either plant a vine, which I did some research on, and the only one, I asked a few landscape architects, and they said that this would be a good plant to perhaps grow on that wall so that it would literally disappear into the hedge. Yeah, something. I researched a lot, and that's the only vine I could find that actually grew on the wall. But also, if that wasn't acceptable, then perhaps putting some sort of bougainvillea trellis against that wall. So I did a little bit of research on that, or lazy Susans, or something that would actually hide that wall and disappear into the hedge.
Okay.
So that was sort of my, I don't really know, I'm just asking what's the possibility of making it disappear. So, the originally, I asked for a modification because Kyle Rosales would go straight into my driveway. And so all the lights go into my dining room, living room from the cars. So they gave me a modification to have this wall higher, so it's about 7 feet, and this is only 5 because of the fact of Alamar going slanting. And originally, the person who complained, it was approved, but then somebody complained, and I think they were complaining, basically, they told me of the 7 foot. And then when they found it was permitted, they just picked on that little wall. And so now they're rescinding, but I understand it doesn't really matter. They said, I wish we would have seen your plans. And I said, well, you could have asked me. I would have shown you. And she said she really liked it. And how could she help me get it approved? I said, it's too late now. So that's where I'm at. So I'm happy to do anything I can to save that little old wall.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, she used the word modification. It was actually a minor zoning exception that was granted by staff based on positive comments. Originally, this was a very enhanced landscaping plan, which helped soften the wall. So I think that was one of the bases to allow the overheight wall. So what the city staff would, again, seek is positive comments to allow the wing wall to remain with either concealment or as constructed, or the option would have to be to cut the wall down to 42 inches and not support a minor zoning exception to allow the wall at that height as constructed.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, it's here because someone complained, not because the consent calendar said no?
You can
Who were the
address that
reviewers?
if you want.
What was-
Denise and Brian had originally reviewed the project at consent, and they were not, they did not support the portion of the wing wall So the applicant has asked staff if there was another way she could have it
Gotcha,
reviewed, so
okay.
that's why it's
So
before
this
you.
is considered screening options, if that's an acceptable alternative, rather than cutting down the wall.
Okay, and then just to be clear, this hedge is at 8 feet or 12 feet?
About
Do we know?
9,
About 9 feet, okay.
and then 2 feet wider, but, you know,
Okay, now, but the hedge law allows it to go to 12 with a approval from staff to go above 8. Okay, so Brian, just so we
Well, I was just
hear
saying,
your
yeah.
side of the story.
When Denise was reviewing it, she felt pretty strongly, and I agreed with her at the time that it probably was a good idea to cut it down because it was an unusual situation. But that was the feeling of our board. So she's come before the full board, so that was kind of what we felt. And she'd like to hear the full board's comment about that.
Is there a wall behind it that's a new wall that's supporting the end of this wall?
sorry,
Is there a wall back?
Further back?
back here?
That goes behind
Back
that.
behind here, is there a
Yes.
fence or
There
wall?
is a new wall that this wall is supported by.
I guess I don't understand
Right
what
here.
you're saying. Going this way from?
Yes.
Yes, it's the
Yeah.
fence, there's a fence there.
It's a fence, not a wall.
Right.
Okay. All right, before we get too far along, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address this project? Seeing none, Chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for final discussion. Who has comments?
If you are going to go with a vine option, I would choose the Ficus pumila. And I disagree. I don't think the wall should be cut down. And I'd support leaving it with the screening.
Any other comments?
I think the wall, from the photograph I look at it, I see the wall is an actual stopping point. Personally, I don't like the wing wall that sticks out, because and all of a sudden you walk up the street, or if you turn, if Kelly Rosales is right here, it comes right in. One way there, I could accept the wall if it was totally screened, but this picture makes it look like it's,
Yeah, it's not
You're
finished
stopped.
yet, but it's going to be. Yeah, the plan.
Nothing in the
We
plans,
haven't,
right?
the whole violation and trying to overturn the violation stopped the project, because I wanted to make sure that we knew what we were doing there before we started planting and filling it. But it will be filled, and I'm happy to do a vine if that's what you're asking.
yeah, I'm on the fence. I haven't stepped over yet. I won't step over.
Just so you know, the two houses facing me have huge hedges too, so nobody
Yeah.
even looks at me.
Okay, any other comments?
I'd like to see it screened. I'd like to see it screened if it stays.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
forgot to mention that the actual gates were slightly constructed differently than the approved plans. They were more decorative in their.
Right, straight across.
And so that would be something that you would also weigh in on, whether that's an acceptable change, the way they were simplified.
The way they got versus. that's what the
There's
double
still
gate.
plans to put the cap on, I believe.
Yeah.
So
We
it's
can-
just
we
what's
have all this
missing is
going.
the treatment on the gates, the way they were shown.
Well, there is a cap going on, okay, which hasn't.
Yeah,
done
all
this.
this,
Okay.
this,
Oh, yeah, that's
everything
kinda
kind of
good.
stopped. It's going to be softer and it's going to look better when it's all planted, but I just didn't do any more once I had this going on.
I'm seeing a lot of, I grew up 2 blocks from here, and all those houses are changing drastically, all
Well,
the way down the street.
most of Alamar's are hedges.
Yeah, but it's changing, and there's only one house that's still there. It hasn't changed at all. And kind of Alomar
question.
and Cuesta del Sol.
Richard, or Robert, excuse me.
Yeah.
It looks like in your drawing there of the front of the building, you're showing like a stone finish on the lower wall. Is that something that is going to be finished that way, or?
On with fascia. I mean, it's going to be like veneer, yeah.
So it'll be a stone veneer. on this piece.
Soften it. Yeah, the picture makes it look really harsh right now.
Yeah, it does look very harsh with that, because it's very angular and there's nothing softening the areas.
Okay, I'm going to weigh in. I know this street really well because I drive it all the time. And this Alomar has got a peculiar situation in it is a main circulatory traffic way for that side of the city. I mean, people that have to live on that have to live with that traffic, and I can understand why they have high hedges and high walls. And so I don't have a problem with this. You know, one of the one of the houses many of us most admire, done by George Washington Smith,
Yes.
sits up on Garden Street
Yes.
in Los Olivos, and its wall is right on the
Yeah.
sidewalk.
Yep.
And we walk around going, oh, that's just a beautiful house because George Washington Smith did it, and it doesn't have any embellishment. It's just a white stucco wall with a gate, period. Okay, that's Santa Barbara blue. And we all go, oh, that's wonderful. And the minute somebody else comes in and wants to do it, we're all going, oh, well, you know. So I'm not having a problem with this at all. I don't think the wall needs to be hidden. I think the plan is fine. If my colleagues think it wants to be hidden, I don't have a problem with the species specified. And I just think it's not an issue. Okay, having said that, the chair would look for a motion to address the applicant's request to keep the wall as is.
SFPD would like to give this project final approval.
It's actually review after final. Thank you.
Once again, we'd like to give this project review after final with the positive comments that we do not find the wall, the existing wing wall configuration to be problematic, and that once the stone fascia and proposed landscaping is installed, that the impact of the wall will be lessened, and that it is appropriate to the Alomar neighborhood and meets MPO findings, uses quality construction, and is compatible. And it is, I will leave it up to the applicant as to whether or not to put Ficus pumila in addition to the rest of the landscaping.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Okay.
Support it.
Is there any further discussion? Not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay, you have your wall.
I have the right to change my mind.
Okay. All right.
You're going to bring a tear to my eye here.
All right. I'll
you
let you
very
work
much.
with Katie about what she needs to keep. And
Thank
what
you very
need to
much.
keep.
Appreciate
Okay,
your
thank you.
time. Oh,
Okay.
no, I have these.
Okay, while we're doing that, let's get ready for item number 3. 820 Centinela Lane. This is here for project design approval. Project must comply with the staff hearing officer resolution 024-17. It was last reviewed by this board on December 12, 2016.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
Yes.
make an announcement about this project.
Yes.
After the staff hearing officer review, it was determined that some of the figures in the project description for both the staff hearing officer's notice and the single-family design board's notice were inaccurate. So the project needs to be renoticed. So action cannot be taken on the item today. However, the applicant still wanted to bring the plans before you. So it'll be before you again after it's noticed. At that time, you can take action.
Okay.
So.
So just to remind us, Mr. Miller, do we have comments from our December 12th?
Is this it? I don't think I have it.
So if you could kind of share that just to get us up to speed, what we did last time.
Okay, I think it's the the board had positive comments regarding the project's consistency and appearance, neighborhood compatibility, quality of architecture, landscaping, and good neighbor guidelines. Number 2, the board reviewed the FAR of 168% as acceptable for this project since the project is mostly subterranean, making the structure appear as a one-story element. Also, the mass, bulk, and scale appear to be appropriate to the neighborhood. Number 3, provide roof material samples. The board prefers a non-reflective material to be used. Number 4, the board supports the proposed fenestration, however, has concerns regarding its possible lighthouse effects and would like the applicant to take that into consideration. Are these new, I guess, is keep going, I guess. Number 5, provide a landscape plan with an explanation on how the oak trees will be relocated. Number 6, the board supports the modification request due to the fact that it's subterranean and is not creating any visual public impacts. Action taken by Miller, seconded by Motisha, 5-1, Bernstein opposed. Motion was carried.
Thank you. So just to reiterate again, Katie, there are some calculation issues, and that's why it has to be renoticed, correct?
That's correct. We need to renotice the project with the accurate numbers, as some portions of the project have increased a bit and some others have gone down. So we need to have the right information noticed to the public if they want to come and comment, or if they should have questions about the project. And at that time, action can be taken.
Right, thank you. So if maybe you could just share with us what you want to share with us today, knowing that we can't give you any
Sure. Should we introduce ourselves first?
Yes, please.
I'm Dave Mendrow, architect.
Okay, are all these microphones?
Patrick Berg with NMA Architects.
Stacy Fawcett, landscape architect.
Yeah. It's telling us the mic's not working. That one's not, okay.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mary Compton, owner.
Okay.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. And yeah, it's unfortunate there was a mix-up with the noticing, but we were all set to come here. Our clients, the owners, could be here today, so we wanted to go ahead, show you where we're at, and especially we have landscape plans, which you hadn't seen before. And our hope is that we can get input today and then come back the following meeting for more of a formal review. So what I thought I'd show today is where we are relative to when we last met with you, and then let Stacy show you the landscape plans. So regarding the zoning modification, we did receive approval. We had support from the planning department, so that's all resolved. The statistics and the project and the design, maybe we could bring the model out first. This is the model that we showed you the first time, and in large part, it's exactly the way we showed you last time. That doesn't always happen, but in this case, we did a lot of preliminary work to make sure we were on the right track, and that paid off. And I think we'll show you we're pretty close to where we were with the original project. The FAR, it was listed as 168. It's actually 164. We haven't increased the floor area of the first floor level is the same as last time, the part that you can really see. The basement has increased about, I think it was 150 square feet, and that was working with the structural engineer, and he wanted to align some walls that we didn't have aligned previously. But that increase isn't really visible. It's beneath the grade. Maybe we'll start going through the plans. Am I going at the right pace?
Yeah, keep going.
These plans are a little large. That's what I tried to avoid that, just couldn't. Probably the most significant change to the architectural proposal was the grading. And what we had before was balanced grading of, I think it was 2,104 cubic feet. And since that time, we've met in more detail with the fire department and working with them to create a safer driveway grade than was what is existing out there now. We were required to do more grading in this area. So the grading has increased due to that, and also our original fill calculations were a little bit, we were trying to balance on site, and we had calculations for fill that were reduced a little bit when we actually had the civil engineer really look at it closely. So right now, whereas before we were balanced on site, now we're proposing to export an excess of cut of 1,488 cubic yards. Now, we can also work to put more of that on the site, but our concern is if we keep putting on the site, we're actually changing the natural contours of the site and making some of the slopes steeper than they are naturally. So our feeling is it's better to, we've got a nice balance here now to export. So that's that. The building heights, we're well below the required maximum height, with the exception of just a couple of areas at one end, and where the floor below is exposed at the garage and at the workshop. In working with the structural engineer, we have increased the height of the roof a foot in these areas here. And then we did, I'm going to go to the roof plan. So the building has the roofs that curve up on the ends, and so these ends increased by a foot. This roof, which is facing east, that isn't visible from the street or anywhere, we actually increased 2 feet because when we modeled it in the computer and looked at the site, it was blocking some views of the mountains and the city. But in general, we're very close to where we were last time with the roof heights. The floor plan hasn't changed. The one change we have made is before there was a third bedroom here, and we ended up making the office a little larger and taking that bedroom out. But other than that, basically it's the same plan with a living wing to the south, a master bedroom wing to the east, and the office bedroom wing to the west. And then the elevations. The materials we're proposing are consistent with what we talked about last time. Now we have actual samples here. And the exterior palette is pretty simple. It's stone, plaster, and glass. So for the stone, we're using a natural tan-colored limestone that's similar in color to sandstone. We're exploring different textures and finishes, including this more rustic natural texture surface, a raked texture, and then more of a honed, but it's all natural stone. Right now, we're indicating the stone on the elevations. And we're thinking that the base of the building, for the portions of the building that are exposed on the lower floor, would likely have more of a rustic finish, whereas the walls up above would have more of a refined finish, but we're exploring different ideas. Basically this material. The eaves of the roof are basically the same material as the ceiling. So the ceiling comes horizontally and then returns up the eaves, and then we'll have a very minimal metal roof edge, this zinc metal color. We'll also use this zinc metal material for the metal walls, and you can see that here. And what we're proposing is a vertical varied pattern. And then for the doors and windows, using a darker gray. And then for the site walls along the driveway, using a darker gray plaster color, which we think will help them visually recede and also provide a nice backdrop for Stacy's landscape. And then the decks, the floor surfaces would be this white gray color granite. And then I just realized that, two things. One, for the infinity pool edge, which has to be underwater, we're going to use this bluestone limestone, which is a dark gray that matches the color of the metal. And we forgot to put the roofing material on here, but it would be a gray color similar to these, and a cool roof. And yeah, these are the elevations here, which are very similar to what we had shown you last time. Grab the existing ones we showed last time. So last time around, this is
what was
we
the
had.
plate height? The plate heights?
Let me go to the sections and I'll show you.
Let's see those first.
That's original north elevation, so that's that elevation.
Okay, back to the sections. These are the heights and the I guess if you want to see plate heights, they're probably on the sections.
Yeah.
They,
I think we should just have proper roof.
oh, we don't have the plate heights?
Labeled the plate
Okay.
heights.
Okay, can.
Okay, these ones actually show you better what the heights are. So here we're at 11.6. At the end of the great room, we're at 13.
So your workshop is 12 feet high in plate height.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anything else you need to present?
Landscape plan.
One question, just a quick one. Where's the front door? I know I looked at this before, and I seconded it, but
Well, in
I
the
lost
model,
the
it's
front
probably
door.
easy to see in the model, but the front door.
Show me the
is
floor
right
plan,
here.
floor plan, and where the pool is compared to the pool. What I'm looking at. Pool here.
Pool is here, the motor
Opposite.
court is here, and this is the entry here.
Okay. So
We
we're
have
looking
a
at front
pathway
door.
that ramps up.
Front door is right here. Okay.
Yes.
This is the living room wing? No, that one.
Here, yeah, master bedroom, yes, bedroom.
And this is the roof that we increased the 2 feet here.
Yeah,
that
push that
bends
out,
up
and you
there.
push the fireplace out.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, this model hasn't been updated to the new plans. This is what we originally showed you.
Thank you.
Okay, landscape plan.
Okay.
If you want to start with the, I did a little bit of imaging to kind of give you a feel for what you're going to be looking at too. The goal is to keep the landscape understated and complementary to the site and the architecture, but keeping it more of a simplistic palette. Combination of stone, pebbles, other types of rock, simple landscape combinations of plantings, some vertical stone elements possibly for some accent. A little bit more plant palette using natives and drought-tolerant type plant material, being sensitive to the water situation, obviously. There's an existing eucalyptus tree that is kind of prominent on the site, so, yeah, there it is. We're not adding the eucalyptus tree. And then there's several oak trees on the site that we're going to be relocating. And we have an arborist letter that's been submitted along with that as well for viability of that, as well as 4 olive trees that will also be relocated. They're mature olives, so. This is the driveway coming up. The motor court at this area. The existing oak trees are located here and here currently. They're fairly young and viable trees, so we're going to move them in this location. There's an existing city building up in this area that's not very attractive, so we're going to use them for screening that a little bit, as well as some native type plantings along the property line there. Coming up to the motor court here, some sweeping walls with this blue color kind of indicates more of a grass or succulent planting used in mass, so it's more of a simplistic. These 3 trees would be sculptural type trees. We're considering sycamores, Tipuana tipu tree that's more of a sculptural type tree. Melaleuca has also come up. Olive trees come up, but that one's probably on the fringe because of its messiness. But Melaleuca that's on the OK tree list. It's the list of trees have changed over the years, I know. With
Melaleuca what?
Quinquenervia or the Lunarifolia. Either one of those? It's considered high fire zone, so I know there's, I'll check it out, anyway.
I'm not sure.
I heard about Melaleuca being particularly
I think it's
suspect.
approvable, yeah.
Okay. Accent tree at the entry here. We have a more of a private entrance to the property used for being able to circulate around the property and/or maintenance. So there's a gated area at this location. More of a DG with stone step walkways coming down here. There's a private kind of master bedroom patio off the master bedroom. There's views out in this direction as well as all these directions as well. So more of a private garden in this location that relates to the master bedroom. Off the main terrace, there's the infinity pool. We're able to minimize the grading in this area. Spa at this location. We're probably going to change this to more of a square spa that steps down and gets a little more naturalistic as it moves away from the land or from the house in these areas. So walking down in this direction, there's views out this way. Not a lot of trees because we don't want to block the great views from the property. So DG gravel material down into this area. We've tucked a covered patio in here with probably a trellis of some sort that's going to have vines and or awning type shading that'll be provided. So it's tucked back into the hillside at this location, but there's great views out this direction and this direction. And mostly we want to screen, there's another house that sits down here, but leaving the existing trees, there's some existing jacarandas and fruit trees down in this area. So from here, your views are mostly this way and this way. And, you know, a little more naturalistic, some site walls and boulder retaining walls, seat wall down at this area. There's a focal element here that then relates to a focal element across this direction and brings you back up to the house and the workshop area. Up at the house level, there's a great sunset view from here that looks out, so tiny little patch of lawn at this area with kind of a sunset patio area here, and then a pathway that circulates back, mostly for utility purposes and circulation. And then all of this is more, you know, just slope planting and naturalistic. A few of these little elements are for stormwater retention on site that we've been working with the civil engineer on. So the equipment's tucked down.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it. There's a little section down there that kind of shows where this sits.
Okay.
Right.
Ocean's out here.
Ocean's out
Ocean's
here.
Okay.
Oh, preliminary plant list is on here.
Okay. Thank you. Before we go to questions and comments from the board, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address this project? Seeing no one come forward, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions.
Yeah, Fred, I have a
Yes.
question. You helped design this building, right? That we're sitting in? My question is, do you know what the plate height of this room is?
Plate height of this room is 12 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Questions for landscaping? Can I ask those right now?
Sure.
I'm curious about the Acer palmatum. You've got this kind of drought-tolerant, native-ish landscape going, and I don't see where where that would fit in.
We like the sculptural quality and the contrast. Another option is the Circes canadensis, which has the purple leaf. But you can see this dashed line here is the overhang, that sweeping roof. So it would be in full shade here. So we were just toying between the two, liking the sculptural quality of the Acer, but understanding that it might be better suited as a Circes.
Okay. Other questions?
No, not right now.
I have just a few. One of the comments that we made last time was the lighthouse effect of all the glass. Did you all address that, or did I miss that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention that. Our design concept for the lighting, both for exterior and interior building lighting, is to have everything recessed and downlights fully shielded. And also, we would use lighting for task lighting purposes, lighting areas within the spaces, but not just lighting the entire house. We also do have all the exterior and interior lighting is connected to a lighting control system with the timer. We do have shades for both sun control and for privacy. They would be black in color, and so those can also be used. And that's our lighting design.
Thank you. Also, you mentioned this trellis that's shown in the section here. So at this point, that's all we know about it from an architectural standpoint? Okay. Let's see. And then, Katie, this is a question to you. The applicant's indicating that roughly 1,400, 1,500 square feet, or excuse me, cubic yards have to be taken from the site. As I recall, that's a truckload is about 10 to 14 cubic yards per truck. So there's 100 trucks going off this site, more or less, or 100 trailers?
So there would need to be, at the time that we can take action in the next meeting, there'll be standard grading conditions of approval that we'll have for the project.
Do you have some sense at this point where that soil is going to go? It's got to go a long ways off this site if it's going out of this area.
I was looking for our civil engineer. He's not here. We can find that out for the next go-around for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, then let's go to comments. They can only receive comments today. We're not allowed to give it any formal action because of the renoticing issue. So, but I'm sure the applicant would appreciate comments.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the plate height, especially the basement of being 12 feet. I don't think it necessarily needs to be that high. I think 9 or 10 feet is more than generous. I also think that might reduce your grading issue in terms of export. Because I asked Fred about this room, because this is a 12-foot plate height. And for a basement to have a roof that high, that's pretty substantial for a residence. So I'd really like to see some reduction in plate heights, especially with regards to the basement.
Okay, we can consider that part of what's driving that, as we do have the workshop down here, and our owner's going to be working on automobiles, and the ceiling height is important for that. And also, we are running all the HVAC ductwork below the floor plate. But we can study that, but just so you know, it wasn't arbitrary.
Got it. So can you explain to me where the basement is and where the cars will go exactly? What's going on?
Let's see. I'm going to go a little further here. Yeah, one more. Okay. So right now we have the garage and the workshop, and then mechanical and storage area.
So this is all 12 feet?
It is, yeah.
The entire basement?
Yeah.
For a lift would fit then.
Other comments?
A lot of cubic square feet, not only linear square feet.
I have one more comment.
Yes.
I'll be curious to see the development of the landscape plan. It's just such a stunning building that I think you could do something really spectacular with that. So, look forward to the final plan. And
That's what they had such a large.
is the roof plan now angular where it was circular? Not that this model shows curves.
It's just like that.
It's just like that, but it just, okay, thank you.
The one difference is that little roof I mentioned is curving up at a steeper rate right there, yeah.
Okay. I'm really perplexed by this project, and I know the last time it was here just before Christmas, and maybe I was in my good Christmas spirit, but as I continue to think about this house, one of the challenges is we all have to look at this. When I say we all, I can see this from my house, this ridge, okay? And I know where this house is because we look at the Christmas tree lights on the palm trees of the line just a little further down the ridge for the big house that sits closer to Santa Barbara. So I'm not convinced the lighthouse effect has really been properly addressed, because we're all going to see this big thing at night. And my sense is we're going to get heavily criticized for approving this house. this is what I call a flying wedge. And I've really been resident to hold back my personal opinion about flying wedge houses. I just don't think they're appropriate at Santa Barbara. However, I have to recognize the applicant has a right to build what they'd like to build. And we have to find neighborhood compatibility. So I'm really torn from approving a house. You know, we approved a house with a flying wedge over on the Mesa, and we have been critically criticized for that decision. And I just fear we're going to be in for the same criticism. Irregardless, I know that the neighborhood association came to this board saying they reviewed it and they're happy and everybody's okay, so forth and so on. But I'm not feeling really comfortable of supporting this project as it moves forward. That's not to say I won't vote no or yes. I'm kind of like you on the last one. I'm still trying to deal with this. I am very concerned that much cubic yards has to leave this site.
Okay.
That does have a big effect on the entire neighborhood. That has to come all the way down that hill, all the way down to Bramer Ranch, out to Cliff Drive, and then either through Hope Ranch or back out through Wilboro Beach, et cetera, out that way, back to the freeway, to somewhere where you're going to dump all this stuff. So, you know, that's a big impact on the neighborhood. That's 100 truckloads, okay? And you know, maybe you have to lose it, and I'm sorry. You know, if you want to work on cars, maybe you have to go find somewhere else to work on cars if you need a lift. Maybe that's the sacrifice that has to occur to get the amount of cubic yards. I was happy the last time you were here, and you said, okay, look, we're going to balance it all on site, and now you're telling us we got almost 1,500 cubic yards that have to be taken off this hill. I'm not sure that's the appropriate thing to do. I could see where, yeah, maybe you have to lose it on site and the hill gets a little higher in some respect, and maybe it's over there, where, you know, wherever it is. But I think that's a bit much to ask for a community to endure. I mean, we all had to live with Cottage Hospital's big hole in the ground. We've had to deal with a hole in the ground at the bottom of State Street. I don't know that this neighborhood needs to deal with a hole in the ground up here on this hill. So I'm concerned, and I really don't think that the lighting issue, we got glass railings on this house, which this board has not supported. Okay, that didn't come to light till today, or at least I didn't see it. We've got a lot of glass. We've got a lot of light coming from this house, and even if it's lit at night with all the light fixtures recessed, it's a big candle on the top of this hill. So I'm not comfortable yet, but maybe I can be persuaded. Okay, other comments?
They're only here for comments, right?
Yeah, we can't take an action.
May I respond?
So let the board finish with their comments and then you can respond.
I said what I had to say.
Anybody else? Okay.
I'll make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I personally think the architecture is kind of interesting, and I understand it's maybe not the typical Santa Barbara style, but I think it, in a sense, is kind of appropriate, and I appreciate the way you've kind of terraced the property down. I agree that you are kind of getting rid of a lot of dirt, so maybe if you could use some more of it on site would make sense, but in general, I would say I appreciate the architectural design, and I think the landscape plans look nice too, so that's my comment.
I agree. I like the design, and I'd rather have a flying saucers come down there instead of down on Oliver. Come on, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, your microphone's on the floor. That's not.
12 feet is, you're going to put lifts down there? I mean, I remember talking about this and this large, what do they call it, FARs, and it was based on the fact that you had a driveway, you had a garage there, but it was all connected, so you had to use that whole basement area, and you were trying not to, and we ended up on 160-something% of the FARs. I'm on a fence again. Yeah, but I do like the design, and I like how you've kept it up there. And I'm like Fred. I look at it
I'm even closer. I'm over Las Positas and Modoc. I look right up there and look right at it. But it doesn't bother me because that house fits where it's being built. There's a lot of really different houses on that hill, that whole area between Hidden Valley and the ocean and Las Positas and Hope Ranch. And this house fits there. It doesn't fit on the mesa, as everybody's referenced it too, but it fits where it's going, and I like the fact that it's one story. I mean, it looks like one story. It's not 2 stories. And I don't think we're going to end up with a lighthouse effect with all this light up there because it's a big area. And nobody's going to see it from, well, they might see it from 10 miles out on the ocean and steer toward it, but I like it.
So I follow comments I want to make, and it kind of concerns me about this board, is I think we need to not vote on these architectural designs, but just to focus on the compatibility, size, bulk, and scale. So I think what you really want to say is you feel the size, bulk, and scale is appropriate for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
But the only other comment I want to make is I do feel you do need to study reducing the grading. I think this kind of architecture is going to disappear. I think that's kind of the goal you're kind of making. So I think I have no problem with that, as you say. But the other comment too, if you look at your floor plan, I don't know, there is an opportunity, and I'm speaking in the spirit of Bernie, there could be a little bit of reduction too. I think some of the square footage is extremely large. If you wanted to lower your FAR, but that's my comment. The rest of the board members may feel otherwise, but I think there can be a little reduction. These are very large rooms. I think Fred's comment that if it's all kind of catering to car repair, I think that's not a good direction to go, because I think Fred has some valid concerns in terms of, I too have gone to Christmas parties where we've approved houses and the people come up and scream at me and I don't know what they're talking about and ruin my time at a party. And it's with these styled homes.
Yes.
These are not, people are not neutral about the style. They either really love it or they hate it. And I usually find out at Christmas parties. But just information for you to take into account, I think, while you're developing the design work, because I think the big issue for this one is the amount of cut and fill, especially the cut. That really should, I think, Fred has a very valid concern with regard to that. So those are my comments.
And if I can just say, kind of playing off of what Brian said, I think it's really important in this project and all the other ones that you'll be reviewing to relate it to the guidelines. So your comments, your questions, those all should be geared towards how the project complies with our guidelines. And it also helps direct the applicant of how they can move forward with the project. So if you can keep that in mind, thank you.
I don't like it, but it meets my guidelines.
So other comments?
I have a question, if I can go back to that. Were the roof, you said the structural engineer wanted you to raise the ends of the roof. Did they previously swoop up, or is that a new development that?
No, it's actually the thickness of the roof has gotten, in order to achieve the structure, our roof has gotten thicker. And so that's just basically kind of pushed the roof up.
So it's this piece right here?
Yeah, those pieces. Yeah. And some of the, we have these 3 roof planes intersecting each other. A little bit of the raising had to do with the relationship of the roofs themselves and finessing that. We've actually flattened, the roofs before had more of a curve. We've flattened them and pulled the curve down, but then the structure has come back up.
So this went from what, about 12 inches to 16, 18 inches?
20.
20 inches.
Yeah.
So it gives the illusion of more of a slope up then?
No, actually the opposite now. We've flattened
got
it out,
thicker.
but it's gotten thicker because of the structure.
Structurally, it had to get thicker rather than a thinner profile.
May I briefly respond to some of the
Yes.
comments? First of all, I hear you loud and clear on the grading, and we'll focus on that. To be honest, it was a little bit of a surprise, but grading is notoriously hard to calculate anyway, and then with the fire department and that. So what I'm hearing is we really need to go back to the drawing board and balance size and site and reduce the grading, and we'll take a hard look at that.
Great.
Design-wise, I serve on the Montecito Board of Architecture Review. I've gone to
Oh,
those
yeah,
same
there-
Christmas parties. Believe you me, that's, when you're doing something unique like this, if I've done 10 of these, I could just say, well, go look at the other one. But we
Yeah,
haven't, it's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so people do get concerned about that. From my perspective, I think we've been very sensitive to the site. I think although this is a site where you can see it, it's mostly from a distance. The building itself appears as, for all intents and purposes, as a single-story structure. We have a lot of landscape screening. It's not really directly viewed from the neighborhood. So I feel like we've done a good job with the mass, bulk, and scale. And also, I think sometimes when people see curved roofs, they think, well, wedge or flying saucer. But I really think that this is a very subtle curve, and it doesn't have that feeling. And from the ground level, it's really going to appear to just be a very gentle curve. So I wouldn't want you to think that this is an exaggerate. I know there's butterfly roofs and things where they're really an exaggerated architectural statement. That's not our intent at all on this project. It really, from day one, our charge from Dick and Mary were to really make this a part of the site and take advantage of it.
With the naturalistic materials.
Yeah, that too, the materials. So I hope that you understand that we actually had those same concerns, and we've met with all the neighbors, and really I feel like we've been very careful to come up with something that is respectful of the neighborhood and the site.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the applicant just needs to get some either further direction or comments supporting or whatever, since we're not allowed to take any formal action.
Well,
So
go
the
ahead.
Chair would entertain a motion of comments only.
All right, I'll make the motion I'll make the following comments. The board appreciates the style of architecture. The board would like the designer to see to reduce the amount of export mitigation in terms of exporting in the field to achieve a better balance of export and fill, to revisit possibly reduction of more lantern effect to the discretion of the designer. The board understands the architect's comments and how he feels how it's organically designed to the topography of the ground, of the landscape, to giving it the effect of a one-story element, which the board agrees. Possibly explore reducing some of the square footage to lower the FAR. And the board appreciates the landscaping.
Okay, so that is a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Can we have the maker of the motion continue the item 2 weeks to the?
Was 2 weeks fine?
2 weeks?
Yes.
So that's part of the motion, continued for 2 weeks? Okay, is that okay with the seconder? Brian, just one correction. You referred to, I think you were trying to say cut and fill, closer to cut and fill balance.
Yes.
Rather than export and fill. So Kathleen, if you could
Yeah.
correct that wording.
Thank
I think
you.
that's what you were meaning.
That's correct.
Okay. Right, that's the motion on the floor. Is there further discussion to the floor, to the motion, rather? Hearing none, I'm going to vote yes for the purposes of giving direction to the project, but I still withhold my ability to make a final decision before we get to the actual approval. So, any other comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, let's go to 636 Aurora Avenue, please. That one goes back to Katie. Color version, that's down here. Okay, welcome. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Carl Schneider, architect for the project, CSA Architects.
Welcome. And I was just looking for some background information, but I will go ahead and read into the record. This is this was reviewed, June 26, 2017. This is here for a second constant review. It's here for comments only because it still apparently requires staff hearing officer review. And as I previously said, was last reviewed on June 22nd, 2017. Mr. Miller, do we have comments from June 26th?
Oh. Further revise the east and north elevations. Number 2, the applicant is to work with the neighbors for neighborhood compatibility. Action taken by Motisha, seconded by Chappendal. Motion was carried. Fred Sweeney was absent.
Okay, thank you. So if you could share with us how you've addressed those comments, please.
We'll go backwards first, I guess. Here's, there's been discussion, and I presume we're going to have neighbors show up, but so the applicant went around. She's actually the last one on the list, so there's really only 12 signatures that are affected or not affected in the immediate neighborhood of the house that are all saying they don't have a problem with the house.
So that's these guys that have addresses?
Yeah. Yep. This is the site, right?
So that resident, yes or no?
Yes, because that's the applicant.
Okay, I'm sorry, this house above it?
No.
No?
The one above it is the one that's probably going to be here to speak.
Okay, and the one at the corner?
Yes.
Okay, and the one below it?
Yes.
Okay, and then all these were yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then just, I'll do that first, I guess. So we talked about east elevation. I don't have the previous one. This deck is new because that was a change, one of the changes. So east elevation, and I believe the north elevation, which originally this was all one roof, all one plane. So we popped this out slightly, pushed and shoved some things to kind of break that elevation up. That we can look at in floor plan. And then this is just a section to show you relative to what the uphill neighbor's going to see or not see. And ultimately, we are at 78%, I believe, of the FAR. So we should be good there. We're under the 80% threshold. And the reason we're going to the staff hearing officer is this little slice right here, where the existing house sits at 9'3" with a 10-foot setback. So there's a 7-inch slice of the house that we are wanting to extend, rather than have a 7-inch jog or whatever. That's why we're going to the staff hearing officer. Okay?
Can I look at the second one?
Right, correct. Yeah. So from a massing standpoint on site, we've tried to pull back to here, keeping soft to the street, soft to the downhill side, and there we have it.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for
That's it.
right now? Okay. Okay, so before we go to questions and comments from the board, this is still here for comments because you have not gone to the staff hearing officer yet?
Correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
That's
Because we need
scheduled
it's not scheduled.
because you need positive comments from us,
Right,
correct? Okay.
correct.
All right. Okay, so knowing that, I have 4 speakers. You'll each have about 2 minutes to address the board. So the first slip I have is from Nick Dinicelli. If you could sit right there and speak into that. Can somebody hit the green light on?
Yeah.
It's on.
Thank you.
So, Nick Dinselli, I am the uphill neighbor. I gave some notes on the last meeting, and I've also emailed you some notes on this meeting as well, just so you have a view to see sort of what I see from my yard. I just want to say straight out, just up front, I'm not trying to block this project. I'm not trying to block a second story. I understand that all the houses on that street are going to have a second story. I'm just asking that they work with us on reducing the footprint of it, reducing the size of it. Right now, as you can see, it is all massed to my side. There's two things that I thought I heard from the last meeting. One was consult your neighbors and work with them on getting some input on the design. And I believe both myself and Joan, the other uphill neighbor, have spoken with the downhill neighbors, and they have not been willing to alter their design or consider any of our concerns. The other one was I thought that it was asked to move that back wall forward a little bit to give us a little bit more space. That wasn't addressed either. So again, I don't want to stop the project. I'm just asking that it can be redone respectfully. I think all that's been added so far is some more windows, some more eaves. You know, the windows actually create less privacy for me. But I'm still left with the same blocky structure. It's a massive structure right on the property line. I accept I'm going to lose 50% of my view. I'm just asking not to lose 80 to 90% of my view. I'm just asking that they can work with another design, something that I believe one of the people here mentioned dormer windows and a lower roof pitch. I thought that was a good idea. I put that in my example. Again, I'm not here to stop the project. I'm just hoping that they will work with us. They'll hear us out. As you know, I had a project on the floor that was approved for a second story. I listened to all the design review board changes. I made a lot of changes. I pulled it back. I'm back from the northern neighbor, Joan. I switched my balcony over to the side so it didn't face south. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Before you leave, though, I want to clearly understand what I'm looking at. So this is from your yard down into the house, correct? So that set of windows is this set of windows here, correct?
This is the side, right? Yeah. So I look out the side, right?
Okay, so that window is this window?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have two windows that face south.
Okay, and then this window is what, further that way?
Yeah.
Okay, and where is this taken?
Sorry, so this is actually the thing that's concerning the neighborhood is because this is actually another plan that CSA Architecture did that's across the street.
Okay, this is the house directly across the
Yes,
street?
that I think we're concerned that right now it looks somewhat similar to this.
Okay. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we understand where the photographs are taken from. Okay, next speaker is Joan Coyle. Welcome.
Hi. I live at the top of the hill, and we have this beautiful view down the backyard to the ocean. And we paid a lot of extra money for the view lot. And this house is going to block about 50% of the view, not only for my house, but for the houses along the top of Roberto and along Juanita. It will also block, because there's no view on this way to the ocean because it's all houses. So the only view we have is down this back swale, and it's a lot of trees, and the ocean is gorgeous. I think that this does not comply with 3 of those compatibility analysis things. It's really a public view of the ocean. Also, they have a very large front yard. If they would move it forward towards the street instead of into the backyard, that would be avoided. But it wouldn't bother anybody to view, because that's where all the buildings are. And also, all of the houses in that area are 1 stories, except for the 2 that they showed with their plan. It would be very easy to move that forward and not be such a big deal for everybody else. It'd still be 2nd story, but it wouldn't block that back.
Okay.
I don't know.
Thank you.
They have showed absolutely no interest in anybody else's interests.
Can I ask 2 questions before you leave? How much higher is your house than the house in question? And
It's a lot higher, but the view is like down this back valley.
Which
I'm on the
house?
corner of
It's at the
Roberto
corner.
and Aurora.
Corner,
So-
right, that's
and-
her house right here, right there.
So-
Okay. So you're going to look down,
If you look down that back valley, that's where all the.
yeah, I see it,
all
I
the
see it,
houses-
I see it, yeah, right there. That's what I'm looking at.
And they'll block about half the.
Okay, how much, excuse me, call you Nick, but have you started your project yet?
It's been approved, but no, we're running into financial problems on it.
Okay, but if if and when your project starts, you're going to block Jones' view also.
We have worked that out, and we actually have changed the roof pitches a lot. So,
Okay.
yeah, we've addressed that. And that was brought up many times, and we actually worked to change that, and that's why we pulled it back.
Okay, that's.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to, let's go to our next speaker, please. David, is it Safatai? Either one. Yes, just come up and use that microphone, please.
First of all, I want to thank the board for their comments the first time, because I think the suggestions were very useful, and I prefer the new design. But I think there is some misinformation that is being conveyed. First is that we have a lot of options, like to move our property forward. Our kitchen cannot be moved. We can afford to do so much. We cannot tear the house down and start again, which is, I think, what Joan would like to see, is something for us to build forward. There's no way to do that. We have a gorgeous front yard that is beautifully landscaped. People walk by all the time and stop and comment, and we don't want to lose that yard, and we can't afford to tear down the house. So it's not an option. According to our architect, who is not here today, she's represented by Carl. She just delivered. She just had a baby. There was one place to put the stairs. Based on the structure of our house and our needs, there was one place. Because of that, we got a particular layout. We were very concerned about Nick and Roz and their feelings, and we did everything we could in order to minimize their view. Our downstairs is 8 feet, which is not high ceilings. Our upstairs, I had wanted 9 or 10-foot ceilings, keeping in mind their concerns, and we've had wonderful relations with them. We are not interested in ruining them, though at this point I really don't know what will happen. We kept it at a minimum. We kept the roof line low. You know, we did whatever we could. We consulted them immediately upon receiving our plan, but we can't necessarily get them to agree with what we want and what our needs are. So we went around to all of our neighbors. Nick sent you a statement saying that the neighbors behind us were concerned because of solar panel that we're putting in. We're not planning to put a solar panel, and that family, Veronica and Mark, signed off. They're one of every single house up and down our street, except one who was not home, signed our petition. 3 houses behind us, and the house next to Joan, who has the same view she has, that signed the original statement, signed agreeing for us to build our house.
He lives in Virginia. He doesn't even.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
We're not going to have a dialogue here. This is a public hearing, okay? And as it turns out, you are the applicant, so you're not limited to the 2 minutes. You have a right to sit with your architect and make comments, okay? So that's kind of how you and your husband have the right. But I'm going to ask you to try to
I'm
consolidate
finished.
your thoughts.
Right,
so
I'm
we don't
actually finished.
Drag it out. Okay, thank you. So, David, you need to speak? Okay. All right. Yeah, we have to do this in kind of a process, otherwise it's a free-for-all, and this board won't get anywhere fast, okay? All right, thank you very much. Is there anything else you need to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Then we're going to come back to the board. The chair is going to close public comment, bring it back to the board for comments and questions. Let's start with questions. Anybody have questions?
I have a question, Robert and Lisa. From these pictures, from this picture right here and this picture, basically this view from Nick's backyard, I'm assuming this is what it is. He's got a view of trees, and in about 10 years, he won't even see the ocean.
That's the ocean right there.
This whole line, I mean, I know how fast trees grow in Santa Barbara. I've lost views constantly of just trees, vegetation growing up, views gone. And what we're really looking at is a view that
We don't know what
couple.
kind of trees these are, if these are street trees, if they get pruned regularly, and palms just are going to go up and continue to make sticks, so
This
maybe
and
that, but,
this.
that might be a...
Tree, I'm sorry, that you're looking at over there is Susie's tree. It's an olive tree.
Okay, well,
and-
let's
yeah.
stop
So
right there. I
that's
made a
not on
comment.
our property.
I made a comment.
I want
Let
to
me-
keep
Not
this
sure.
to
Yeah.
questions from the board.
Okay.
The way this works is we're going to have questions from the board, then we're going to have comments. Then I'll allow the applicant to, so make notes of what you'd like to say. Otherwise, we're going to get into crosstalk and we don't get anywhere fast.
Well, what we're going to
Okay,
end
so
up.
you're asking the two
Okay.
landscape colleagues your question.
Don't you think the trees are going to grow up? And I've had,
On what the species is, what the
Yeah.
max height is, if the owners prune them, if they're city trees, if the city prunes them, would you like the land?
Yeah, I agree with Lisa. I mean, it does depend on the tree and how people choose to maintain their trees, and who knows if those trees are going to be there forever. Somebody might choose to
If it's a
eliminate
pine,
a
it
tree
might
one
die
day,
of
you know?
pine pitch canker.
I own houses on the Riviera and I own houses downtown and out north of town. Trees,
Yeah, it just
neighbors
gets
do
bigger
not
and bigger.
prune the top of their
Sometimes.
trees.
Well,
They let them grow, and the Riviera has lost views. I mean, at one time there were no trees on that Riviera.
So-
Go ahead.
so-
Okay, Leo, let me.
Go ahead and finish. I think we
Okay,
got
I'll
your point.
Stop there. Okay, can I make another comment?
Yeah,
We're going to end up, what we're thinking about here is the fact that you really don't, some of the neighbors don't want to look at the side of a second-story house rather than blocking their view, because they don't really have, they're looking at a roof here rather than a second-story wall with, and we asked him to set it back, make it look more interesting instead of having a sheer, two-story sheer wall, and he has done this. I'm just making some comments, and
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, I do.
Or other questions, rather?
No, I have
Okay.
no questions.
I'm going to hold you to, because I have a couple of questions and I just need to get solidified. So one of the questions I have is that window right there. And I'm going to, where am I going to? That, what elevation is that? That is the, that's that window. Okay.
Yep.
So in theory, that's above a headboard.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Same
that-
thing here.
And
yeah.
that window's high?
And that window's high.
And that window's high, okay. In relationship, one of the things, and Brian, I don't know if you did, because I was not here,
Yes, I can fill you in.
convey the fact that we're not
Yes.
allowed to guarantee people's private views. You
My
shared that.
emphasis was that
Okay.
they had a right to build a second story. It was one of those situations, as you commented, where it's one of these old developments where it's, it's steps down, they're all single-story homes, and now they're building second stories. They have a right to the second story, but I emphasize that they visit their neighbors and work
Okay,
it out.
I'm trying to get to the site plan.
This was Bill and Lucille.
So in relationship to this second floor, is that window we were just talking about is right there?
Mm-hmm.
So it's right there,
Right.
more or less.
More or less.
And the window he's showing us in the photograph.
In that corner.
is in that corner and this corner.
Right.
okay?
Correct.
And there's another window which appears to be like over a kitchen sink or something, is like right here. So, and otherwise, out here in the yard, he's looking down, this thing isn't blocking anything. So from his patio, this whole photograph from his patio and his outdoor bar and all that stuff, he's still got an ocean view. Maybe he doesn't have that little piece of ocean view. Okay, so we have this, and then the purpose of sitting, this sits over new foundation and new footings, correct?
Correct.
Whoops, second floor. So this is relying on the walls below,
Correct.
okay? What about, that wall is relying on a wall below? No.
No.
That's kind of up in there,
Yeah.
okay. So this is kind of relying on whatever you're going to
Whatever's-
structurally have to do to make this all fly.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's see if I got another question. And landscaping is basically staying pretty much the same, correct?
Correct. Because they've just redone it over the last 2 years.
And then I noticed that there was a comment about solar panels or something, and whatever. One of the things that this board has very little say about is solar panels, because it's a state law, so we're fairly limited. But I don't see where you have an exposure to actually put them, if you wanted to put them, right?
Well, by code, we have to, quote, allow for their use someplace, right?
So is that what you're
So
showing?
that's what this is.
Right. But that's not exactly where they
No,
should be.
it's not south orientation.
Right,
But
they're not, they won't be the most efficient location. Okay, but you
Right.
have shown them.
But we
Okay.
have shown them.
All right, just so everyone understands, the state of California says any homeowner has the right to put solar panels on the roof, and this board has very little say about where they go, what they look like. We can kind of dictate the color of the frame and a few other things, but pretty much if a person wants to put panels on the roof, we don't have a say. Okay, I think that's the end of my questions. So do we have any more questions? Okay, so you still haven't been to the staff hearing officer. I'm going to make sure I'm correct.
Correct.
Okay, and did we do positive or negative comments or any comments last time?
Yes.
No, well,
On
not
this
on
little sliver?
Not in the specific
Okay,
area,
so
no.
ultimately, that's, the applicant is looking for those comments so they can move on to the staff hearing officer.
To get a modification.
To get the modification, et cetera. So that's kind of where we are. Okay. So let's go to comments. There's comments. Anybody? Okay, I want to go back to the floor plan. If nobody has comments, I'm going to move ahead. You know, this is, I went out there and spent some time just this afternoon and walked around as I've done before, even with the previous applicant who has the home just above this, and trying to understand what's going on in the neighborhood. And it's not just the two houses across the street. There's actually a house at the corner that's 2 stories lower down. And as everybody's pointed out, most all of these homes are going to get to 2 floors at some point. We even have an applicant next door that, if he's lucky, he will find a way to get that built. So we're going to have to deal with second floors and so forth and so on. So the struggle I have is the privacy issues. And I think to some degree you've solved that by keeping this window high here. That probably at least deals with being able to look in each other's windows. I'm just wondering if you were to make a move here that might get us a little closer and still do exactly what you're trying to do. And I'm just wondering if you were able to shift this plan. See if I can do this. Shift this plan so that, oops, use the paper incorrectly. Shift that plan so that that goes like here and get you a deck here and moves this other bedroom down here. That's why I was asking what you're relying on to get all the structure done. To get these bedrooms moved around, and you're going to end up with a little hallway here, I think, to get that to work. But if that would give a real relief to the relationship it has with the corner over there of the other house. Not that we're protecting the view or getting the view taken care of that corner, but it does move the mass back a little bit.
Moves, yes.
It moves the second floor mass back a little bit.
Towards the street.
Right. You still got the first floor that you still have there, but maybe the deck goes like that, or maybe the deck goes like this, or whatever. But it moves this back a little bit. It makes this bedroom maybe get some windows looking down the ocean at this corner, and this bedroom over here, a little different arrangement.
Well, and see, that, I would argue that bedroom, this bedroom, forces this
Yeah.
bedroom to have its primary view towards his house, where right now we don't have that. This is the primary view, and that's the primary view. And, I mean, in theory, we could literally eliminate these windows if we wanted to at the moment. So if there's a trade-off you're giving up.
Yeah,
to
no, I
do that.
understand.
Those windows were added to make it more interesting. They were not in the original plan.
And I understand. So I'm just playing with the massing right now.
Understand?
And just seeing if somehow we could relieve the massing a little bit and push part of the second floor a little bit more towards the front yard where their garage is over here, which it has windows, or I couldn't tell whether it has windows or doesn't have windows. So that's just a thought, as maybe a little ways to change the configuration just slightly. Okay, other comments?
Yeah, Fred, my comments was, because you weren't here the last time, was to look at what you've suggested in the past of having a 7-foot plate height with dormer windows or something just to push it down a little bit.
Just to get the whole plate line down.
Yeah, just to play with the roof line.
Yeah.
The problem with that
Yeah.
is that the existing roof slope, which you're matching, is already at 3 and 12.
Right, but.
So to
yeah.
do some kind of dormer,
Well, no, yeah, but don't do the dormer. One of the things we've been able to do with other homes where we've really had this height issue, where the size scale and bulk thing is, so drawing to you, first floor is 8 feet, and, typically 9 feet to the second floor. And then what we've done is we've gotten these plate heights to go down to 7 feet, and you end up with an interior room that gets a vaulted ceiling. But what that does is it lowers the profile by almost a whole foot, and particularly with 3 and 12, because you can't really get below 3 and 12 because the code won't let you, okay? You have to be at 3 and 12, but it does bring the whole profile of the house down, and what it really does on the street side, unlike the house you did across the street, it really does bring that bulk down. We did that on a house that really helped out. We did a house where we got them to do that on Upper State Street, just before you get up to Constance. And we really did ask him to just lower that down a foot on the second floor, and it made all the difference in the world as it sits between the two other existing houses. So I would suggest that's worth exploring. I'm not saying you have to do it, but I think it's worth exploring to get the bulk down and get some of it shifted forward. But I'll see what everyone else says. Okay, other comments?
Support it. And I'd like,
And remember, we're only doing comments because he's still got to go. So we either have to decide comments to come back to us, or we're okay with everything and let him go to the staff hearing officer. That's kind of the two things. Sure, yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, do we actually have to get to that point? I mean, because nobody.
Yeah, because
that's really not affecting anything else.
The staff hearing officer, and I'm glad you're pointing this out, the modifications on this side, and nobody seems to have a problem with that side of the house.
Right.
So we could give we could do one of three things. One is we could just say, look, we want you to do all the studies and change and come back. Or we're happy just as it presented, and you can go to the staff hearing officer and we're okay with this. Or the third option is, we'd like you to do all these other studies, but for the purposes of getting on the agenda for the staff hearing officer, which takes months, we would give him positive comments on this piece, so he could at least get that part. So there's one of three actions. So the chair would entertain a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion.
You want to try it? Yeah. Okay, so it's just comments?
The board will make the following comments, is the board can support the modification as aesthetically appropriate and does not pose any consistency issues with the following design guidelines. The board would also like the designer to explore lowering the plate height to 7 feet.
On the second floor?
On the second floor with a vaulted ceiling system to minimize bulk issues. The board also highly stresses that the designer and the owner meet with their neighbors and have it be an amicable design process. Suggesting pushing the front second story element forward, explore that design possibility to minimize any view impacts with the adjacent neighbors. That's my motion.
If the maker of the motion could say you were continuing it indefinitely to the staff hearing officer, correct?
Yes.
Continue it, yes, indefinitely to staff.
I just have a question. Is there an opportunity for me to say anything? Or are we
Just a
done?
minute,
Okay.
let's finish getting the motion settled. Okay, so is that the motion on there? Katie, you're okay? The motion's correct? Okay, so there is a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Okay, there is a second to the motion. Now I'll open it for comments. Yes, ma'am.
If I understand you correctly, so you're saying the ceilings would be 7 feet but slope up?
The plate height.
Yeah, the plate height at the edge is
right,
7
I
feet.
understand. So
Here, let me,
okay, I have a problem with that
Let-
because
let
I
me-
have lots of paintings
okay,
I want to be able to put up. And I
well,
won't
let
be
let me,
able to-
let me share with you what that looks like, okay? So here is the floor. Here's somebody standing at the second floor. Here's the first floor, okay? And what we're proposing is to get the plate height on the outside plate at 7 feet. That puts this roof joist at 3 and 12 up like this, okay? That still gives you 7 feet of wall. And on the inside, it can still be up at 8 feet, okay? And you can have it do that if you want. That's a way you don't have to do a full vaulted ceiling, you can do it like that. So I think that's a way to accomplish it, okay? All right, so that's the motion on the floor, okay? Is there,
Am I allowed to make a comment?
you'll need to come up and speak into the microphone, please. This is televised and recorded.
Your name is Fred?
Fred Sweeney, and if
Hi,
you
Fred,
could,
I'm David.
okay, so if you use this microphone, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fred, when I was hearing what you were saying about moving the second floor forward, you said the rationale was not to preserve views. What was the rationale?
The rationale is to get the bulk out of the back of that house and move it forward, so that as these houses cascade down the street, we try to get, because we've reviewed this house and given approval for that house just above you.
Yeah.
There's a second floor proposed.
Right.
So keeping that in mind, as I start looking at, part of the challenge of this entire neighborhood is when they were all built, they were terraced by the developer. And part of your challenge is when the developer built all these homes, is they had setbacks that were set. All the houses were built to setbacks for that. When the city did their overlay in 1975, they ignored all of that. That's causing you to spend $1,000 to go in a modification for an 8-inch sliver, okay? That's the difference, why you're having to go through all this step, because the city didn't pay attention, in my opinion, to how these developments were laid out on the mesa. You have them all over. I mean, not only your neighborhood, neighborhood and the other side of Miggs Road, et cetera. So what I'm trying to look at is, as we do all of these homes that keep coming wanting second floors, is trying to look at the big picture here of how they all continue to step down that hillside. So I think there's an opportunity to get your house to kind of meld in with all the other houses that are coming and that have been approved, so that the second floors all work. Because you know what? This guy below you is, at some point, somebody's going to come in and want a second floor, and you're going to be here objecting to their second floor, okay? And the guy below that, until we get to the corner where the second floor already exists. So part of our challenge here at this board is to try to look at each project on its own merits, but we also have to keep in mind how this is going to be compatible with the whole neighborhood. So we're trying to anticipate how this is all going to look.
So you've already approved Nick's house?
Yes.
Which I think is a 3,500 square foot house?
I don't recall the square
I
footage.
believe so. And mine is a 2,400 square foot house. So what I'm trying to understand is you're telling me I need to reduce my bulk because you've approved a house far larger than
It's
mine?
the bulk, not the size. We didn't say anything about reducing the size.
Uh-huh.
We didn't say anything about
Bulk
reducing
meaning what?
The bulk is the context, the massing of the house, how big it looks from the street and the other neighbors. Has nothing to do with size, is a different function. Size is the 2,400 square feet or the 3,500 square feet, et cetera.
Well, isn't his 3,500 square foot house going to look a lot bigger than my 2,400 square foot house?
Not that we went through. As I recall, we made him do the same thing. We had him move things around. We had him reduce heights, et cetera. That's ultimately how
Well,
we got it approved.
here's my main
The
problem.
motion's been made, sir. I think we
Oh,
need to vote on it.
Can I comment?
Yeah. You can continue to comment.
Well, let me comment. My comment is that I hear the word privacy thrown around, but we're the ones actually in the fishbowl. Nick raised the level of his backyard 3 feet and looks directly down on us, and he's going to build a much bigger house than ours and will look even more down on us. So my concern is we want to work with everybody, but we're the ones who everybody is actually staring down on. So I think you need to bring that into your
Well,
consideration.
we understand all of that, but that's what we're trying to look at, okay? In the whole context. We're not trying to pick on you, okay? We're not trying to pick on you. We've got to make sure that what we approve, because a few years from now, several years from now, many years from now, you may not be in this house. There'll be some other owner here, okay? And it's going to be built. So part of our task is to look at just the function and architecture, the size, scale, and the bulk of the house, irregardless of the occupants. Because at some point, these homes are going to be owned by different people, and these footprints are going to be in play many years from now. Okay? So that's what we're trying to deal with. That's our task. Okay?
Okay.
And my goal, I really was emphasizing the last time you were here, is you guys need to have dinner together and work it out.
Don't tell us who we need to
Yeah,
have
we-
dinner
we-
together.
Well, have wine
you're
or a
really
party.
No, wait a minute. Time out.
I'll tell you something. My purpose of this is you need to get along with your neighbors.
Yes.
We cannot resolve your issues with your neighbors, and this is a personal issue between your neighbors. All we're doing here is addressing the size, bulk, and scale and design of your house. We made a motion the best we can, but as Fred underscores, in this neighborhood, there's a major issue. And we can only go so far. And the only primary issue for us is neighborhood, neighbor guidelines, good neighbor guidelines.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop the conversation there,
There.
please. Stop the conversation. There's a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion to the board members? To the motion on the floor?
I would like to say something.
No, I'm closing comments now. The motion is to the floor, to the board. Is there any further comments to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, the chair is going to call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried.
Can I just clarify? So we got,
You got approval
we got
to do that.
approve of that,
Go
we
do
can go
that.
forward with that, and we're going to come back with what we're doing here. And
Awesome.
Okay? Perfect. Okay? All right, thank you. Okay, let's get on with our next item, which is 509 La Marina Drive. This is a new item, so I'm going to read, as the applicant is coming forward, I'm going to read into the record the description of this new project. This is a proposal for additions and alterations to an existing 1,365 square foot, one-story, single-family residence with an attached 550 square foot, two-car garage. Proposed project, excuse me, can we have conversation outside so I can finish reading? Thank you. Proposed project includes a one-story addition of 81 square feet, a second-story addition of 507 square feet, and an interior remodel of 105 square feet. The other site improvements include a new 165-foot patio cover over an existing patio and a new 53-square-foot second-story deck. Proposed total of 2,468 square feet on a 10,700 square foot lot located in the Hillside Design District is 65% of the maximum floor-to-lot area ratio. Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. If you can introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Rick Moraga, the architect for the project.
Welcome.
I'm Cannon Sutter, the owner of the property.
Welcome.
Anne Marie Sutter, owner of the property.
Okay, thank you. You could sit closer if you'd like. Okay. Okay. Since this is a new project, if you could tell us what you're doing, please.
Basically, we're adding a second floor to an existing one-story house. It's just a master suite, basically, over the garage portion of the house, which is at the southern end of the property. Currently, there's an existing patio in the rear of the house, and we're going to put a covered patio over that portion. And then also at the rear of the house, there's currently a kitchen area that we're pushing out that will be underneath the new portion of the master suite.
If you could walk us through the plan, please.
So in the site plan here, this dark outline here is the existing house. This portion here is going to be the new second-story portion, so we've set it back from the side and from the front property line to try to match the look of the house. This small portion here is the first floor addition underneath the master suite. That's going to be the expansion of the kitchen into the backyard. And then this represents the new covered patio at the rear of the house. This is the existing topography showing the neighboring parcels being uphill from here and those, of course, being downhill. This is the existing house as it is today. Again, existing elevation as it is today, front and rear, and elevations as it is today. Section through the house showing the relationship. It's a raised floor project. It's not on the slab. And the existing roof line as it is today. So it's a Dutch and gable roof. So on the first floor here, we're pushing out this portion only in the rear of the house and adding this covered patio over the existing. So this line here is the line of the existing patio we're adding there. Then this is the garage portion of the house, and we're setting back here and setting back here on the second floor, and then putting interior stairs. And then upstairs, you can see the master suite. We've set back from the front, we've set back from the side. By the way, this is already 14 feet 2 inches existing, so we set back another 4 feet beyond that. So we're about 18 feet 2 inches. Overall, we put it over the garage portion of the house to try to keep the elevation down. And we tried to set with the roof of the house, which you'll see in the elevations. We tried to keep the same look of the roof with the Dutch gable end roof. Here's a roof plan showing that we're keeping most of the lines of the first floor and then adding this small portion over the second floor on the south end of the house. We're leaving the north end of the house basically alone, and that helps minimize some of the costs. This is the rear elevation showing the patio cover. This is the new second floor portion, the expanded kitchen out into the backyard. This is the south elevation. Again, this is the existing roof line of the existing, and we've come up this bit. The difference in height from this existing ridge here to the new ridge is about 8 feet 3 inches. The front elevation, we're trying to match some of the existing stone, stucco, the window looks, again, the shape of the roof. Same thing on the north end. Of course, this is set way back from the north end of the house, but still keeping in line with the existing that's there.
Okay, anything else?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Can we get those pictures back? Do you have photographs?
Just the ones that we submitted.
Do we have, Katie, do we have photographs?
Please go to Katie.
Yeah, those will go back for the other project. Okay, so perhaps you can go through these photographs, what we're looking at, please.
Sure. So this is the front of the house. Actually, the garage is at this end. So you can see the stonework here. Oops. That's this one. Oh, I'm sorry, we're back one sheet. The stonework here, the shape of the roof, the Dutch end gable. So the rear of the house is just a flat line right now. Again, there's the existing patio there. Will be popping out over this portion of the house. This is the south end elevation. There's just a bathroom window and a garage window. There's really nothing there.
Okay.
And then these are views of the neighbors' houses. It's a neighbor across the street, neighbor south, north neighbor. This is the street view of our property.
And so that house is this house?
Yes.
So that's above you? And
This
that?
is- yeah.
And the house on the other side is where?
That's this one, I believe.
That's this house.
Yeah. No, that's across the street. I'm sorry. This one.
on the top, on the right.
Right.
Okay. So just turn around and tell me which ones work. Okay. Okay.
This is the neighbor to the south.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, anything else? Present? Any landscaping?
No, we're really not changing any landscaping at all.
Okay, before we go to questions and comments from the board, the chair is going to open it for public comment. So each speaker has about 2 minutes. So our first speaker is Anastasia Russo. Paul Rubel, please. If you could come up and use, we've got we'll need to let them use that microphone. Yeah, just have them move. No, that's okay. You can sit there. I'll have them use this. There you go. Right here. Okay.
Hello, my name is Paul Rubel. I am the owner of 527 La Marina.
It's got to be green to be on. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
My name is Paul Rubel. I'm the owner of 527 La Marina,
And
which
that
is
is where?
you looked at the neighbor to the north. So I'm the second neighbor to the north. So if you look at the street, it's
Here, and then there's one up at the corner?
No, it's
This is La Marina Drive.
There's one here.
Okay.
And you're here?
and I'm here.
Next one.
It's
Second
it's
one
a
up.
question mark street. It kind of comes straight
Yes,
up
and then it curves, and you're at the corner, what I call the corner up
Two
there.
houses away.
Okay, gotcha.
So, obviously, this is the same problem you guys are facing all the time, right? It's a terraced neighborhood set up for single-story houses where everybody's got a view. So, I'm obviously concerned about blocking, and it will block some of my view. I guess I would ask that the house, as much as it can move west as much as possible to sustain some of my view. Also, I was concerned about the height of the roof. It looks like the roof's actually quite short, if it's really actually 8 feet from the ridge line of the current house. The other problem I have is that the north-facing wall of the second story, that window, the way the terraced is, they didn't do a very good job of terracing, so the house directly north of this house is not that much higher than this current house. And the way my house is, and the way it's terraced, I can literally stand, I'm looking straight into the window of what was proposed, their north window of
That's
the
this
second
window
story. Yeah, it's right in the living room. It's a pretty much of a direct shot.
And your house is under construction right now?
It is finishing under construction now.
And
I
we reviewed and approved that house?
Correct.
Okay.
I actually downsized my house slightly
Hers
because
right
we were
here.
able to work to get it into a single story instead of a double two-story and retain the size we needed.
Okay.
And then just things of, like I said, roof lines and things like that. I know the board was commenting about roof pitches, keeping things to 312 and those type of things to keep with the genre of the neighborhood. And so I just asked that we get the roof lines as low as possible.
Okay.
So obviously, I know it causes construction and it caused me trouble, but it does help with sustaining the views.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next speaker, Brian Sawaki.
We're both on the same card.
Okay, one at a time then. You each have 2 minutes, please.
I'm Elliot McDougall. I'm the owner of 535 La Marina, which is cat-a-corner northwest of the house.
Up here.
Up here to the back, correct?
A couple of pictures just so you can see from my view into that's from the deck, and this is from the dining room, the rooftop of the house.
Okay.
Right there.
And are you the house that appears to have a second floor? Is that what I'm looking at when I
It's
see it?
not a second floor. The garage is raised.
There's a peak roof with glass?
So the garage
So that's the
has
house.
a room that extends from the garage, but the
Okay.
house is set down because the hillside is so steep.
Okay, gotcha.
So there's
Okay.
no. It's not actually like a second floor. It's just built into the hill.
Okay, I only observe what I can see from the street. Go ahead.
So I think obviously echoing Paul's comment, the view is the major concern. We, I bought this house because of the view. That's what everybody in the neighborhood enjoys, right? It's a terraced hillside view. I think the key point is that nobody in the whole street has built a second story that blocks anybody else's view. There are only a couple second stories, and they're built into a hillside so that they don't block anybody's view. And so this would be an exception. This would be the first second story that blocks anybody. We've done a ton of work in order to enjoy this view and made substantial investments. We just undergrounded all the power lines so that we can see it. Thousands of dollars of work. So it's not an insignificant thing to us. It has real monetary impacts. It has real enjoyment impacts. And it's out of character with the neighborhood. Nobody has blocked anyone else's view.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Elliot?
I was Elliot. That's Brian.
Oh, excuse me, Brian.
Brian Sawicki, I'm the co-owner.
Okay,
of
if you could speak
house,
into that, please.
The co-owner of the house at 535 La Marina with Elliot. So just a couple things. Appreciation for some of the comments on the earlier projects and how they might relate to here. In one of the photographs there, you might see the tree. That neighbor does a really good job of pruning the tree. It's about as large as it ever gets right there, and she cuts it down once a year.
That's this
half.
tree?
So, yeah, so I thought I would address that. I had a real appreciation for your comment about that you actually visited the site of one of the other projects. I didn't know that's something that you guys do, and I appreciate that.
I visit all these
Yeah,
sites.
that's great. And so invite you to come over, and I'll make dinner on the deck for all the neighbors. And then just draw the real distinction between Lower La Marina and Upper La Marina. I think Lower La Marina has the characteristics very similar to like the Aurora project, where if you get a glimpse of the ocean, people say, I have an ocean view. And I think you brought out that comment. And this is, I think you mentioned a hillside neighborhood.
This is defined as a hillside neighborhood. That's one of the reasons it's here.
Okay, so that sounds like that might be a distinction between like Lower La Marina, where the terracing is much less severe, and we actually are rural on hillsides with real views of the ocean.
Okay, thank you. Right, then I have Aaron Muslera, sorry.
Hi, so we live at 443 La Marina, and we actually are super, Gannon and Andy are some of our good friends, and I'm not interested in destroying those relationships, and I'm also in support of them trying to do something to modify the size of their property. But I don't feel that the architect did a very good job of bringing you neighborhood support. He brought a picture of our house that's over 4 years old. If we could, can we see where our yard is?
Let's see, all I have is that. I don't have a,
I have a
another
picture
document?
that I took just on my phone that shows. I think I can show you here.
This one.
Yeah, so this is a very old,
turn around the
very
camera.
old picture.
So this is your house?
This is our house, and it is situated, there was one picture. Their house is situated kind of, our side is like right next to their side. So where they're gonna go up, and all those windows, those are directly down into our backyard.
They're back over here, or are they over here in the driveway?
All of these
No, this
windows,
is the front part of our.
all of these windows right here,
Okay.
these look directly down into our
Okay.
backyard.
Okay. Okay?
So.
Our house is here.
Okay, I understand.
I had just, honestly, I'm blessed because my view's not going to be blocked, but I am concerned about other people's views being blocked in the precedent that we're setting in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So, we would have an impact to our privacy.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. The conversation is a public hearing, so you have to be able to speak into the microphone. If you want to speak, then you need to fill out one of those slips, okay? So we want to keep the conversation to the table. Thank you.
Okay, so I just have you can see that the elevation, this is a picture of their house and our house.
You need to put it over here. All of this is being televised. We have to share it with the
Sorry,
public.
I'm not well trained in this. Okay, so this is quite a bit higher than our house. So when it goes up, it's literally going to be looking directly down into our.
Okay, so that's the current front of house, of their house.
That's their house.
And that's your garage
that's
door.
our garage, and this is a little gate into our our little
Okay.
area.
And so your garage goes back maybe 20 feet? Does it have windows in your garage?
There's a window on the front
No,
of
on
it.
that, on this side.
No.
No windows. So the first of your windows don't start till after 20 feet, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. All right, then we have, thank you, Anastasia, say that correctly?
That was correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anastasia Russo. I own 541 La Marina.
Which is where?
It is next to Brian and Elliot.
It's this parcel right here.
So it's over here?
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
all right, thank you.
And I am just here because this addition will be impacting my view. And I didn't know where it stood legally or, or anything else, but I do want it noted that I have concerns about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else wishing to address the board? We got one more, okay. If you want to come forward and speak into that microphone, please. And your name is?
Javier Muslera.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron's, I own also 443 La Marina. Just wanted to mention that you asked for a window or no window on that side. There is a door that goes from that garage out there. And also the other thing that I want to have in consideration is if we also are in 1,200 square foot house, so if we were going to build, most likely we're going to go building on the garage, and I will be concerned that will be a concern for them in the future also. And I just trying to be a good neighbor too with everybody else here.
Okay.
So that was my comment.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, anyone else wishing to address the board? If not, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions and answers. Before I do that, so that the public understands, this board cannot prohibit someone from building a second floor. Under the rules, under the zoning code, every resident that's qualified under the zoning has the right to build a second floor. But our obligation is to look at the size, scale, and bulk of that addition. Those are three different things. Size has to do with the square footage generally of the addition. The bulk has to do with what we call massing. How big does it look? And the scale has to do as it relates to the human person. So we generally look at things in relationship to what the human person is. So those are three factors. The other factor that this board looks at is neighborhood compatibility. And just because there is a perception that a neighborhood does not have second stories doesn't prohibit us from allowing that to occur. And there are second floors. There are second stories, even if they don't block someone else's view. I don't know that until I've observed that. There is a second story house just at the other, as you make that first turn on La Marina Drive. So the other thing that you should know is we're not obligated to guarantee anybody's private view out of a window of anybody's house, okay? We are concerned with the public view corridor first, what can be seen from the public right-of-way and from the street. And as I mentioned earlier, I go look at all these sites. I don't go onto private property. I look at it from the public right-of-way, from the sidewalk, and from the street. And I know several of my colleagues do the same thing. So the issue that we're sensitive about is privacy between windows, but we only are able to maneuver that in terms of locating windows and getting both the neighbors and the applicant to sort that out so that we try to minimize the privacy issue. But again, we're not here to guarantee anybody's view from anybody's window or anybody's deck. That isn't how this works, okay? So these folks are asking for a second floor. Our obligation is to determine, is the second floor appropriate in its location? Is its size, scale, and bulk compatible with the neighborhood? But we are not in a position to flat out deny a second floor request, okay? So I hope you all understand that. So now, having said that, let's go to the board for questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, if I
Yeah.
can, I just want to make sure the board acknowledged a letter of
Oh,
public
I'm sorry,
comment
yes.
that we had submitted.
And we did have another one from, yes, Gloria Antonio at 515 La Marina Drive. She's requesting to do story polls, and I'll address that in a minute. They have a view to Anacapa Island. They lost their view because some trees were planted. She's concerned about the second floor deck and the new patio cover. Okay. Story polls. If this board determines that it's in the best interest of the board and the neighborhood that story poles be erected, there is a formula for that we follow. That determination is generally made as we get closer to the acceptability of the general concept, what we call project design approval. And at that point, the board can make a determination whether or not story polls are in order. Story polls are done with a certified civil engineer, so they have to be accurate. That costs some money to the applicants, so we're pretty judicious about when and if we call for story polls. That'll be a decision we make. I would suggest to the applicants that they not put story polls up until we've made that determination. Sometimes we've had applicants who try to get out in front of it, put a story poll up. It's not done to the proper requirements. They get taken down. We haven't had a chance to look at it, et cetera. So that will be part of the process. Just so you all know, the process here is this project is coming to us for any action. Apparently, there are no zoning issues or modification requirements. So if this board chose to do so, we could give this project design approval today. That action is appealable directly to the city council. That's 10 days from the action. And I think it's, what, $800 or something like that?
Yeah,
more or
there's
less,
a few.
to file. So when we do that action, that allows you as the neighborhood to determine whether or not you don't like our decision, et cetera. Or the applicant may want to appeal if the decision is not in the applicant's favor. The next time that occurs is when we give it final approval. That is also an action that's appealable directly to the city council. That's when the drawings we believe are complete, and we'll make a determination of whether or not they're then ready to go to the building department for building department action. So that's the process. In between those two actions, this board may ask the applicant to come back many times, or a few times, or no times. We may look at it and say we're perfectly satisfied and move it to the next action. So that's kind of how this all works. Each of those is a public hearing. Each public hearing will have a section in it where the chair will allow for public comment. That's limited usually to about 2 minutes. And then the discussion is back to the board. So we're at the board now for questions. Questions, anyone?
So the plate height on the second floor is 9'1". Is that what it is? And it's only 8'1" first floor.
So that's to the plate, 9'1".
Then some of the places, some of them, like the north elevation is plate height is lower because the roof.
Because you're dropping down right here. So you've got 9'1" to here, but this is lower? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, that's the area that's over the stair.
Do you have a building section through there?
No, we don't.
Okay.
That's over the stairs, north elevation.
So that's here. As it comes down, we're clipping the plate down over the stairs to help blend that a little bit better.
Okay.
That's that's over, okay. Is there a reason why you made the second floor a foot higher? It doesn't need to be.
Well, two reasons. One is that we would like to have more, I mean, anybody would in a house like to have more volume or more elevation, but because it's a Dutch gable and roof, you can't.
Describe a Dutch gable to me. No, finish what you were saying.
Okay. Because it's a Dutch gable and roof, you can't do a ridge that goes the entire length of the room and then do a typical volume like you were discussing in the last project. Because the Dutch gable end roof stops here and it becomes a hip roof on the end. Right, so I can't take this ridge all the way to the end, put a post here with a long beam and a big high.
Typically, the track houses are built like that.
So instead of being able to do that, I got a little bit of elevation by having a 9 foot.
Okay. And, God, you answered both my questions, okay. I'll hold off on my comments.
Okay.
Just questions
Other
now.
questions?
I have no questions.
Anyone else have questions?
No.
Okay. So you don't have on this drawing, and I think, where did the scale go? Oops, oh, thank you. So the total height, more or less, is 24 feet?
It's on.
Is it on, where is it?
I think it's on the other elevation.
So, the ridge.
23.8.
23.8, okay, so that's to the ridge. This fireplace element is, and you were going through the plan, and the other thing the audience should know, we don't see these drawings ahead of the moment they're placed down in front of us, so this is the first time we've seen these drawings. So sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to understand what's going on. So the fireplace is this fireplace.
Correct.
It's existing, so you're extending the chimney up.
Correct.
Okay. And then, plate height you asked for, and you don't have sections. Okay, those answers the start of my questions. Other comments?
Comments?
Yes,
Questions?
okay. Either way, comments now.
I have
Okay.
comments.
Go ahead, Brian. I'll let you
I'm
go
probably going to
first.
say the same thing you're going to say.
Go ahead.
I'm really uncomfortable with the 9-foot plate height
Me
on the
too,
second
yeah.
story. I think
Especially-
you've really got to put it at 8 foot. The other thing I was noticing, and scaling the elevation, where are the exterior elevations? The window, the doors on the second story too, look like you have it 7 feet. Is that the header height?
A little low.
The head height, yeah, I believe it's 7.
Yeah, so those should be 6'8". I think for this kind of neighborhood, you've got to really bring this second story plate height down. I would make your header height 6'8" and your plate height 8 feet. And I don't know about those Dutch gables, but in this particular context of the neighborhood, I think 9 foot is too high of a plate height for this.
And
that's the end of my comments.
yeah, I walked through a house that had low 8-foot ceilings, and all of a sudden you walk into the upstairs, and it really feels weird. You all of a sudden, to me, it feels weird. And
I can see that,
yeah.
although
And
generally everybody that comes over doesn't walk into that.
Yeah, well, I see I see the pictures that we've seen of all the lots that are terraced in this area, and bringing these plate heights down would considerably change the view that everybody is being blocked by, that are your neighborhood, I'm looking at neighborhood compatibility. You bring the plate heights down to something that's reasonable, to me that's reasonable, that matches the rest of the house, and you would give your neighbors something. I didn't say that, but.
Well, I mean, and part of that, I see where you're headed with that, but, one of the things that we're trying to be sensitive to in the elevations and the view is that, first of all, if you go back to the grading plant here, the homes that I think would be most impacted that are, here talking about the impact, they're set back because the second floor is in this area here. They're set back some 80, 90 feet
Yeah,
from
well, we're not
their
looking
house.
at-
No, I understand, but the elevation of the new roof is nearly, about 4 inches above the elevation of their finished floor. So it's not like we're putting something up here in their view, it's down here at floor level to them. And we're not putting a slab out there that's straight on to them. It's something that's angled to their view. So it's only about a 12%.
We understand, but I think the board is going to have you move that plate height down. Okay?
Well, I understand that.
Okay. Now,
that's-
here is part of the challenge you have. You're trying to convince us that your design works, okay? Quite frankly, there's not enough information here for me to make that determination. So I'm going to give a list of things you need to do, okay? You need to do a longitudinal and horizontal section through this site that relates it to the houses on each side. I need to see a plan of approximately where the window locations are on those homes. You need to come in with Google aerial photographs so we can start to understand where all these folks live and where their houses are in relationship to your house. That's a basic piece of information. You certainly need to do building sections, particularly where you're trying to demonstrate that you have a plate height issue. rather than verbalizing it. I'd like to see that done by a series of sections, if that's what you're trying to sell us on. I think that some of the proportions here need some work, particularly on this trellis element up here. I'm not convinced that that really reflects what has to be done and built that way. I'm particularly concerned about what appears to be a heavy detail on this eave configuration. So I'd like to see some idea of what you're really doing there, what you're proposing.
Matching the existing.
Okay, and we don't have any photographs to see that. So you need to give us information. You've got to sell this board that what you're proposing here is doable. And the way you do that is you've got to give us information in order to allow us to make that determination. Right now, there isn't enough information, in my view, on this to give you what you need to have and ultimately to get what you want. Okay? So you've got to get more information and you've got to get more explanation. So if you're trying to match the current eave situation, we need to see photographs, because even though I've gone out and seen this site, I don't have a photographic memory to hold on to. So it always helps to do that. If you can get photographs from your adjacent neighbors about what they're looking down at, that's important. I can tell you that we have seen many homes where we get complaints that they're going to block my ocean view. When we really get down to it, sometimes what we learn is, yes, it's blocking. They have an ocean view this big, and they're getting that much blocked. Okay? I don't know that, given the information we have sitting in front of here, and I only can see this from what I can see from the public right-of-way. So that's part of our struggle here. The reason for the window locations is we do want to, in fact, try to make sure that we're not impeding the privacy issue both on your part or the neighbor's part. So having that information is going to be very helpful. So I think you've got to do some more work in order to tell the story. Okay? Other comments?
What is this window? This is the south elevation. What's that window right there that in the middle of that elevation comes out of?
That one? That one?
Yeah, right there.
This?
Is that there?
That's a garage window. It's existing.
It's existing.
A garage window.
First floor garage window.
Yeah, see, and you've got things like up here, here's the floor plan.
First floor garage.
Somewhere in here.
System garage.
Yeah, here it is. So what I didn't see, that window there, okay? And it looks like you're building on something outside of that? So is that a new wall?
It's a wall that's just for the structure to enforce for shear.
Okay, so that's, where am I looking? That's these two elements. Correct. Okay? And this is a window. That's not a door open, is it?
No, it's a window.
So that's that window right there. Okay? And this little window is that little window right here?
Correct, yeah, this one.
Okay, and then there's another window right there. Okay. All right. I don't know. The way I was taught to do windows is to show something like that so that I could see where windows are, so I don't get it confused with an opening.
Looks like an open patio.
Yeah, so that's kind of helpful. Okay, and anyway, so I think there's more information in order for at least me to give you clear direction.
Where's the front elevation? Look at the front elevation. East elevation. East. I think the east elevation is front elevation.
That's
I guess right. Window. Yeah.
Okay, and where is the
So the garage is down. That's what I was getting off of. Garage is set down.
Yeah. So where is
3
this
feet.
in relationship? Where's the curb line? Is that down lower?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's helpful if you get that in this drawing, so we can kind of see the relationship of this house as it sits up to that house, whatever that house is, that house. Then we can kind of understand the context. If you really want to sell this, what you do is you come back with a drawing, maybe at 1/8 inch scale, not 1/4 inch, that shows that house, this house, and that house, and how they all relate along the streetscape. That's what we're having to determine. Streetscape and neighborhood compatibility. How does this thing fit in with everybody else? And particularly because you're the first one, at least on this segment of the street with a second-story proposal, that's going to go a long ways to help us understand how this all fits. Okay? All right. Any other comments? Okay. The chair would then look for a motion We've got one of several actions. You could accept it just as it is and give it project design approval. You could make motions with comments only and request the applicant to return with additional information. There may be some other form, but those right now appear to be maybe the two forms that a motion might take.
I will make a motion.
Yes.
The board would like you to return to us with the following information in either, 2 weeks, indefinitely?
Indefinitely or 2 weeks? You want to hear what the list is?
Yeah, you want to hear the list and then make the decision? Okay.
You can decide.
That we need you to show sections, longitudinal and horizontal sections, locations of existing and proposed windows, either Google aerial or some other photo showing where you are in relation to other neighbors. Also photos, I said photos. Finished grade, show the finished grade on your elevations, and a streetscape with building outlines to show the neighborhood stepping down the slope would be useful. What else? Did I forget anything?
Plate heights.
Plate heights. We'd like you to restudy coming back here with a lowered second-story plate height.
Preferably at 7 feet 6 inches?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll accept that language.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
That's
Pre-
a
7
7-foot,
feet, 6 inches.
6-inch plate height on the second story.
Okay, and then just so I'm clear on when you talk about windows, he's showing his windows, we want some idea of where the immediate adjacent neighbors' windows are.
Yes.
Okay. And the sections are horizontal and longitudinal, they're site sections.
Yes.
And other building sections as needed. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is that your motion?
That is my motion.
I'll second it.
Do I have a second to the motion? Is there further comments to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. Okay, we'll see you back here when you're ready.
Actually, sorry, did we decide 2 weeks, indefinite? What was the?
We
What
were
was
going
your
to leave that to
choice?
the applicant. Okay, so indefinite, okay? That's the motion is indefinite. Okay, thank you. Okay. Let's see, those are all the comments on, whoops, let's put these all together. I think these are all the comments on. All right, there goes that, there goes this.
What item are we at now?
Okay, is there any further business before the board? If not, the chair will adjourn.
Thank you.